Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
I can pretty much guarantee you'll be entertained today. The show has everything I could cram into it. We're talking about sex. Do you actually need sex? Do you think it is a biological imperative to keep you alive? We're going to explore that a little bit today. Stick around. Thank you. Thank you. This is my Boomhauser look today. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, good enough. That's enough of that. All right. You know, I got some new sound bites. I have not had opportunity to actually use them yet. So how are we all doing today, guys? Welcome to another Wednesday edition of The Rational Male. I am Rollo Tomassi. I am your host for the next 2 hours and probably longer. Today we are going to talk about, this is actually a fairly old topic, but it has sort of come back into, I think, popular consciousness because of a few articles and actually a few research studies that I have been made aware of and some conversations I have participated in, I would say probably in the last like 3 days, maybe 4 days. And as a charter of this show, this show used to be called, well, the Sunday show anyways, used to be called Red Pill 101 with me and Pat Campbell, but Pat's gone on to other things. And so now I still feel like I have an obligation to sort of go back over some of the old stuff as well. I usually do that on Sundays, but this is a good opportunity, I think, particularly because certain themes come and go in the what we call the manosphere. I wish we had a better name for it, but in, let's say, the men's interests sphere of the internet, of Twitter, of online, whatever we're calling the manosphere right now, things come and go, and I have seen they tend to come in like cycles, like back in November. Maybe you remember this and maybe you don't, but usually for whatever reason, it comes around in November. I think it came out because the Gab, the online alternative to Twitter, supposedly the online alternative to Twitter, decided that they were not going to allow pornography on their platform, and that's it's their platform, do whatever you want to, right? And so that was like sort of part of their charter and everything, because on Twitter it's not hard to find hardcore pornography if you just simply type in the right combination of letters in the search term bar, right? So when stuff like that happens, that's when you'll get a certain faction, a certain interest, let's say, within the manosphere will start to take it upon themselves to have some sort of crusade against like masturbation, or like NoFap. It was a big deal back in November, and it came and it went, and that's it. And no pun intended, but it did. I mean, it comes in phases like that. And this is probably that time, like last year, with November of 2019, was probably, I don't know, gosh, maybe the 6th or 7th time I've seen something like that come around. I've seen a lot of guys, particularly in the, there used to be I don't know if they're still around, maybe they just simply changed their name or changed their, their affiliation per se, but there used to be a group of guys who were the True Force Loneliness guys. And that was something that I was made aware of, I think back in like 2012 or 2013, somewhere around there. And I noticed that a lot of the same, I won't say arguments, but the same, let's say, observations that the True Force TFL guys were making were very similar to what was going on with sort of like incel communities, or there was a forum right, but I think it was 2014, maybe it was 2012 to 2014. There was a forum called PUA Hate, and that's where a guy like Elliot Rogers, where they were active, guys like that, anyways, and I think maybe even Elliot Rogers was. And it was just sort of these disaffected guys who had tried PUA, or they were sick of like being taken for a ride, or they just didn't believe the grift, and I can understand why they would think it's a grift, because that was sort of in the very early days of what I now call the hustle economy, which is where we're at right now. But it took a little while for that to develop and kind of evolve into what we have as the hustle economy right now. And I understand, right? I mean, these guys were sexless. These guys did not understand social dynamics. Even RSD was, certainly RSD was one of their favored targets. A lot of their instructors, back when they actually instructed game, and they actually had some before they deleted all of their infield videos off of YouTube, back, I think last year, the year before, they were the target of a lot of these guys who were just like, that. You'll never work for me. I'm never gonna be able to do this kind of stuff. Or I tried all that, and I hate those guys even more than I hate the guys that I really hate. And it was, I don't know. As soon as the Elliot Rodger thing happened, then all that kind of, they scattered and then they reformed, and suddenly it was. There was another form that popped up after that. And so, like, I see these things sort of like morph into different things. Now, I'm not saying MGTOW is in any way associated with that, but a lot of that same, I think, sentiment sort of exists in MGTOW right now as well. Certainly in Black Pill. I would be very interested to see if there were guys from True Force Loneliness who would now identify themselves as Black Pill. I like I said, I've seen these things come and go, and of course, I think really the most important thing about this, or the thing that sort of motivates these guys, is they all have one common problem, and that is to solve their reproductive problems. Every guy has that, really. I mean, every woman has that as well. They have different means and methods. Men and women have different ways or strategies of solving that problem. And as I've said in the past, if you read books like Promiscuity by Tim Burkhead, and maybe The Red Queen and a few others, you'll understand that men and women's mating strategies are not necessarily adversarial, but they're certainly they're competitive, let's just say, and that's a kind of the place I wanted to start today, because today's topic is something that I've actually written on. I think I've got probably 4 different essays on this. The earliest one that I did was called "You Need Sex," or "Why Men Need Sex." You need sex. It's in the. By the way, again, all the relevant links to not just the essays I've written, but there's a few other things that I'm going to refer to today. If you're wondering if you want to do any like further reading, or you want to educate yourself on any of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, I usually put reference material, reference links, usually about 4 of them, and you'll see them in the description of this video. So that's what we're going to get into today. And the reason why I want to get into that today is because of 2 things that have happened in the last 4 days. One of them, it was an article written by my good friend Roosh V, and he I have to explain a few things about Roosh too, because I haven't really talked about Roosh all that much. I haven't really cared to talk about Roosh all that much since his conversion. And I know John from Modern Life Dating has, and a few other people have, and quite honestly, it's hard not to think of his conversion, let's say, as genuine. It seems like a sort of another transformation, or almost like a necessary transformation into something into what he is now. And if you've read my first 2 books, I quote Roosh quite a bit, and used to be on very good terms with him. It was myself, Roosh, Royce, and Dalrock. We all used to be back in the good old days, right? Back in 2010 through 2012, I think 2013, on the Return of Kings forum. The Roosh V forum. That's what it was. We had our own private forum for the guys who were the authors, or sort of the movers and the shakers, I think. And then, for whatever reason, Roosh decided that he didn't want to talk to us anymore, and he booted everybody out of it and closed that forum, and that was the end of that. And really, that's, I think, when he sort of morphed into some other things. Like he decided he wanted to go political. He decided he wanted to be a little bit more, that's when neo-masculinity was a big thing. That's when he threw the red pill under the bus, and then he brought it back and said he was the father of the red pill. And there's a lot of other stuff that went on back then. As far as I'm concerned, it's water under the bridge at this point. But maybe I didn't have the, I don't know, maybe didn't have quite the understanding of where he was or what he was about back then that I do now, with, now what, 7-8 years of understanding what's going on with the guy. However, he wrote this one article. He still is writing on his own blog, which is good. Thank you, Roosh, for continuing to write on your blog. I've quoted him, and I've like I said, I put him in the acknowledgments of the first book and the second book. And I did so because I think prior to his sort of, taking the God pill, he had some very good stuff, and I still go back and read his stuff occasionally. I think it was a lot of the stuff that he did, I think right before 2016 was very significant. The stuff that he wrote from like 2009 all the way up to about the end of 2014 was spot on. I mean, still is spot on. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's one of the 3 R's of the manosphere: Rollo, Roosh, and Royce, right? But he wrote this new article, and he's talking about how it's titled I wish I would have remained a virgin, or I wish I remained a virgin. And I kind of wanted to go and dig into that a little bit. Now, before I get started here, it's real easy for people to say, "Oh, Rollo's talking about Roosh. I can't believe it." Well, okay, I'm not trying to flame Roosh. I'm not trying to tear anybody down. Whenever I do something like this, or if I do like a case study, or I did a video sort of tearing down, I'd say tearing down, but I like analyzing and sort of deconstructing that guy from Pinnacle of Man. I can't remember the dude's name. I've done this several times where I'm just sort of picking apart things. I did this recently with that girl who was talking about like MGTOW or the red pill or something like that. And I don't even remember her name. I just did it about maybe a month ago, I think. And I'm going to give you the same caveat that or footnote, whatever. I'm going to give you the same caveat that I said before that. Is like, I'm not trying to understand. I'm not trying to attack Roosh. I'm not trying to attack anybody that I'm deconstructing here. I know sometimes it sounds like, well, you wouldn't be just deconstructing them if you didn't want to tear them down. No, what I want to do is I want to sort of deconstruct the rationales that go into building up this ideology, these ideas. Okay, so I'm not throwing ad hominems. Like I said, I still to this day have a good respect for Roosh and what he has done. So. And same thing with other guys who I actually like when people will give me, like, I say, well, I disagree with you. Okay, fine. People will say, well, I want to debate you, Rollo. We're going to debate. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm good with debate. What are we debating? And usually that comes down to like, oh, we're going to, I think you're a cult leader. We're going to debate that. That's not a debate, man. That's just an opinion is what that is. That's just you, an uneducated opinion, but that's your opinion. If you want to talk about whether you think hypergamy is real, if you want to talk about like some specifics, if you want to say, well, here's why I think what you're talking about here is wrong, factually inaccurate, and here's X, Y, and Z. Great. I'm totally down. Please educate me on those things, because that's where I came up from. I came up from those kinds of debates when I was on So Suave, when I was on All Fast Seduction, when I was back in the day, back in the good old days, one of the reasons I didn't want to leave the forum environment was because of that. Because I wanted people to say, well, that's not how things worked out for me, or that's not how the women in my country are. That's not how things in my culture are, or whatever. And so we would bounce ideas off that. Really, that's what the manosphere is all about. It's a consortium. It's an aggregate of men's experience with, lots of things, but like in our wheelhouse here, it's intersexual dynamics, and has been for almost 20 years now. And so that's important to me. I want that kind. When people veer off into like race or politics or ideology and all this other stuff, it's like, okay, that's where you kind of lose me, unless it's like specifically about like intersexual dynamics, because that's what I talk about. If you want to talk about politics on your own channel, or you want to talk, race realism or whatever it is that you're talking about on your own blog or whatever, be my guest. There's plenty of those out there. But when I'm here, I try to stay as objective as I possibly can, and that requires me sometimes to dissect what people are talking about. And it's easy when I've got a woman, a young lady, let's say, who's 22 years old, I don't know, whatever, how old she is. She was older than that, wasn't she? I think she was like 27. Anyway, so a young lady, and like, how did she come to the ideas that she has? That's what I'm into. That's what I want to understand. I want to see, how did that person come to these conclusions? And so as I pick through this, again, this is not me flaming Roosh. This is not me and I've got another guy here too. His name is Dr. David J. Lay. And he was the other, he was the other tweet this last week that kind of led me to today's topic. And he was also quoting, and so just to clear things up here, Roosh's article is one thing, but I thought it was interesting because it also sort of spoke to what Dr. David Lay was talking about in this new, I don't say it's a new study, but he was pointing out this new, I guess it's a report, or maybe it's a meta study of some kind here. He says, and I've got it here, I'll bring it up in just a second, but it says trends in frequency of sexual activity and number of sexual partners among adults aged 18 to 44 years in the U.S. From 2000 to 2018. Now, long story short, this is what Dr. David J. Lay has to say. He says, 1 in 3 men aged 18 to 24 report no sex. Lower, and now, granted, I don't know if this is necessarily new news, because I remember the GSS study, the general survey study that was done, I think, in, I want to say a fall, maybe late summer or fall last year, reported pretty much the same thing. And I've talked about this as well. And of course, when this news hit, guys in the sort of MGTOW, black pill community saw this as sort of their, like, it's time to wave the banner, like, we're right, kind of thing. And maybe this is sort of a newer, I guess, confirmation of that. He says 1 in 3 men aged 18 to 24 report no sex. Lower income and social status predicted lower sexual frequency. Okay, that's again, okay, good. I want to know. I'm not tearing down. Actually, I kind of like David Lay. I think he's a pretty cool dude. But anyways, but how do we come to that? Then of course he asks this question. He says, "Is this the incel phenomenon? Perhaps." It is also the result of delayed marriage. Okay, that follows. I get it. It is not the result of porn. That much is clear. So we'll dig into that here in just a little bit today as well. I've got, do I have you, Sam? Oh, sorry, Sam, you were on a different number. Now I have you. Sam Bada is in the chat room and he is moderating right now. So pay your respects to Mr. Really quickly here, he says, hi, Rollo. Doman Lowe says, this is the guy with the frame tattoo. I remember that. I saw that. I still haven't received your autograph book. Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that. Doman, we'll talk about that at the end here really quickly. And then what did you have to say? What's this last guy here? I don't want to interrupt too much of the flow here. When will Pat return to your show? The door's always open. I've told Pat whenever he wants to, come back on, he's more than welcome. I actually called him and tried to get him on when he had made the announcement about his cancer and his chemo that he'd put on his own show, on his terrestrial radio show. And I don't know if it's a physical thing or whatever, but he just wasn't up to it. So but the door's always open, and Pat knows that too. In fact, if you go to my website, therationalmale.com, I've got a blog update and some sort of, like what's going on as far as the book's concerned, the blog's concerned, this show is concerned as well. I probably will bump that over to my Patreon subscribers as well, but it's there, and there's a lot of, you'll go there and you'll understand the situation with Pat. Okay. So anyways, getting back to, let's just start with this really quickly. I'm going to put this up on screen and let's see, because I can just read this for you. It might be a little bit better. I wanted to go pick this up. So this is Roosh's. Can you guys see that? I need to back up a little bit. All right. So I'm just gonna kind of pick through this and just riff on this a little bit right here. Again, not a cut on Roosh. This is where he's at, right? I think it's his second or first story that's on his blog right now. All right. So, oops, wait a minute. Put that back up. Okay. It says, in the past, my advice to virgins was clear. Do everything you can to lose your virginity. Improve your look, learn game, and start approaching numerous women so that you get lucky. There's that word again. With one, and stop being a dreaded virgin. I can no longer advise that. If you are a virgin in this current year, I advise you to stay that way until marriage. All right, so let's just pick that apart really quickly here. When a guy uses the term lucky, that to me says one thing. That sex is based on fortune. It is based on metaphysics. It is based on superstition. It is based on feminine mystique. So if you get lucky, it's a sign that the gods have smiled upon you. It is a sign that you've been fortunate. And that fortune is something that you're going to have to really put that in if you're writing notes, write that in the side of your notes right now. Because what happens is when guys talk about how fortunate they are to be with their wife, or fortunate they are or when we say, hey, did you get lucky? That right there is sort of this, I want to say, like mental acceptance of a luck-based idea anyways, of having sex, rather than like there's actually a process. There's actually ways that you can do it. Okay. In fact, he'll even talk about that here in just a second. And then of course what he says, and I think this is probably the part that's going to rub a lot of guys the wrong way, and we'll get to this a little bit later on in this article. He says, I advise you to stay that way, stay a virgin until you're married. So in this day and age, as probably 90 to 100% of the people listening to this or reading this right now, the state of marriage, particularly in Western cultures today, is not advisable for most guys. It is something I've talked about for a very long time. It's actually something I actually took the opposing position when I had a real debate once with Dr. Everett Piper. Now, he was pro-marriage and I was against marriage, but I'm not really against marriage per se. I'm just simply against the way we do it now, and brought up a lot of pertinent, information and points as to why the way we do marriage right now is really an all downside risk for guys. So, continuing, he says, Western culture has inverted the natural order. Keep that in mind as well. Sex has been elevated to a virtue and virginity demoted to a sin. If you don't have a sex life, then you're missing out and must do everything within your power to remedy that problem. All right. I would argue that he's correct about this, but for the wrong reason. Western culture has not inverted the natural order. They have embraced the natural order. That's just it. So sex has been elevated to a virtue and virginity is demoted to a sin. Well, if you're going to reproduce in this life, that would require you to have sex. Simple as that. That is the natural order. The natural order of human beings is to find someone, for men to, solve their reproductive problem. And to do so, you've got to find some way to successfully seduce and have sex with and reproduce with a woman or many women, depending on what your mating strategy ends up being. The natural order is actually you getting laid. That's the natural order. The unnatural order is remaining a virgin until you are married, particularly in this day and age. So if you don't, and let's be honest here, that's the feral way we've been doing things for a very long time. If you're going to inject morality, you're going to inject society. In this case, he wants to say it's Western culture. If you want to inject religion, if you want to inject, the proper way to do things, well, those proper ways of doing things are actually buffers against the natural order. So the natural order is pretty much what everybody is already doing right now. So if you don't have a sex life, you're missing out and must do everything within your power to remedy that problem. Yes, because that is you solving your reproductive problem. Okay, so this is what I believed as I went through 4 painful years of high school and then 4 excruciating years of university as a virgin. I think this is something that a lot of guys, probably majority of the guys right now, can sort of relate with. So I get guys who tell me all the time, like say, well, Rollo, I am a 26-year-old. I'm a 30-year-old, and I've never even kissed a girl. How do I learn game? How do I go from where I'm at right now to being where I want to be? How do I go about like learning social skills enough so that I can at least interest a woman, even finding a wife, even if that's your conviction, even if your conviction, your religious conviction, your whatever, your moral conviction, whatever it is, I don't care if it's what religion it is. If your conviction is no sex before marriage, you still have to learn game. You still have to find a way to go from being single and sexless to being, in a relationship and reproducing with a woman. So it is imperative that you understand how game works, how social skills work, what women's nature is really all about. It's imperative for you to do those things. So to say that, just back off and just don't do anything, don't learn anything, don't in any way aspire to learning how to either seduce a woman or how to even seduce a woman, like just to get to know the girl so that at some point you will get married so that you can have sex and you can reproduce and you can have that idyllic, maybe you'll need a time machine to do it, but that idyllic, nuclear family or whatever your idealized notion of a married relationship is, you still need those skills. But here's the thing is like he describes this, and I think a lot, and this is not just Roosh, this is a lot of guys will describe this. They'll say, well, I need to lose my virginity. They think that in some way it is a social issue as opposed to a like evolutionary issue, like a reproductive issue for them. That's why I keep calling it the reproductive problem for guys. In fact, I probably should write an essay defining what I mean by the reproductive problem. Okay, so everyone was getting laid except for me. It seemed I was missing out on reams of pleasure and intimacy. I was in a state of extreme lust, but could not get a single woman. I felt like a low value man, a loser. Okay, this is where we make judgment calls. This is where we get qualitative in here, because I think that a lot of guys, when they get into high school, particularly I shouldn't say high school, when they hit puberty, right? When you get to be about 14 years old, we talk about this, we laugh about this, right? We say, well, when that kid's not making good judgment calls, that kid's not making good decisions because he's in puberty, because he's all swimming in the hormones, and he lets the little head to do the thinking for the big head. And so when we see a kid who's like, say, between 14 and 18, maybe 14 and 20 years old, I think that's maybe we don't do it so much anymore, but at least for my generation, probably the generation that came after, that was something that we just sort of took for granted. Like when you are in that state, when you are sort of in your teenage years, that's what we called teenage angst. Right? It was like you don't know what to do about it, and guys are trying to figure things out. Guys are especially trying to figure out women, or girls at that time, anyways, and they're especially trying to figure out how they can go from like how can they have this sex. And things have changed. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you. I think that it's a generational change, because with the internet, kids as young as 9 years old have access to hardcore pornography just in the palm of their hand, streaming 4K free ubiquitous pornography that for me at 9 years old was couldn't even think where I would find something like that. And like a Hustler magazine or a Playboy magazine was like pirate's gold to kids of my generation, right? It was something that you didn't talk about, but you just kind of like kept your stash somewhere. Now it's everywhere. It's wherever you look. So that teenage kind of, I think the dynamics of trying to solve that reproductive problem, or trying to find a way to get a girl to even just go to like first base, man, like just to kiss you, or to get a kiss, or to get our cop a feel, right? To actually have sex was just like almost unimaginable for most guys, unless they were like really, they were really physically the kind of guy that women couldn't, like the girls at the time couldn't resist. And those guys were few and far between, right? I mean, we talked about this last week, is that, most guys are beta. It was the 80-20 rule, remember? Probably more than that now, right? 80-20 rule. Most guys are beta and they're trying to figure things out and they don't know how to do it. But what happens then is you add a value judgment to that. And you say, well, I can't get laid, so therefore I am a loser. Therefore I am low SMV, low sexual market value. So it becomes a blow to the ego. And I think right now it's probably more intense. And I'm not going to say that things are, well, it's all the same. Oh, he's an old man. He's trying to talk to us about things he doesn't know about. Well, no, I get it, man. I understand that motivation and that, quote unquote lust, right? That motivation, that teenage motivation to want to solve your reproductive problem, but in the context of what I call the new order, right? The new order of access to information, new order of the ease, I should say, of access to things like streaming online pornography for kids, for boys, right? And let's be honest, that's where most, like I watched this, and I did not put the link to this in the description, but I watched this was on YouTube, and I watched this documentary, and I think it's a 4-part documentary. And I think it was Sterling Cooper who told me to watch this, but it's a documentary about how girls today get into pornography, because that was one of the discussions that I'd had with him was, we were asking, ask a porn star or anything kind of thing, right? And I wanted to sort of get a red pill perspective, and he said, go watch that documentary. And it's these girls who they're of age, they're 18, 19, 20 years old, and how they went from being, teenagers to traveling to Miami or to Vegas or to Reseda, Northridge. I guess that's the San Fernando Valley of California is the porn capital of the world, or it used to be anyways. But San Fernando Valley in California, Vegas, and Miami are the 3 top places to go to if you are an aspiring porn actress, let's say. And it tracks these girls and what there's the similarities of why they wanted to get into pornography. And in each and every one of those cases, it was an exposure to pornography at an early age. It was, I saw these girls doing this and I wanted to do that. I like to have sex anyways, and this seems like a good way to make money, and I wanted to get into it. And it tracks, I think, like 3 or 4 of these girls as they all sort of come together from like different parts of the country, and they come together in Miami. I'll dig up the link for you guys. It was actually a very educational and there's no, I don't think there was any nudity or anything in it. It was a documentary. It was like a study of these girls. So I thought that was interesting, but like it sort of defined, I think, what a lot of guys are going through, like this generation of guys is going through, is if you were born, after year 2000, if you were born into the internet generation, you've never known a world that didn't have certainly pornography, online pornography, the ease of access to pornography. And I've said this before as well, is that I think that's pornography is usually today, and even maybe in the past, certainly since the sexual revolution, pornography has been the resource that most people, certainly in Western culture, have used to learn about how to have sex, what they think would feel good, what they think that they would like to do, what the things that they would like to get. Like, that seems like a good sexual experience. I would like to have that with someone. I would like to have that with her. And so when those guys get into that sort of, when you're a young man and you're, say, between the ages of 10 and like, say, 16, and you're exposed to that, like I was saying before, the women, the girls who do that, then maybe now they're porn stars, or there's sort of this new understanding of sexual dynamics. And it seems like a lot of guys in that sort of demographic, let's just say from like, let's round it off. Let's say from 13 on up to like, say, 22, guys, I think, seem really kind of powerless. Like they're never going to get, we're never going to get it. We're never going to get it. Like that thing from Beavis and Butthead, we're never going to score, that kind of angst. And it's funny because it's familiar, because we see it happen. And so you got these guys who then use that as sort of a way or a benchmark, let's say. And this is where I think, I think myself, as well as a lot of MGTOWs, get it right, is that what they do is they use women as the metric, or their success with women as the metric for their own self-worth. And in that case, I do understand that. I get it. I think that's correct. I think that, how you go about solving that reproductive problem is really the issue, not so much that what it is. Like I said, the analysis is certainly accurate, but how we go about solving that reproductive problem is the difference. So here we go. I was in a state of extreme lust, but could not get a single woman. I felt like a low-value man, a loser. Upon graduating from university, I implemented game teachings and I found online and lost my virginity within a year. Victory. I was no longer in a sinful state and could enjoy life with the rest of my sexually active peers until nearly 20 years later, I realized that the sex profited me not in the slightest. All right. Well, there's a lot else that's gone on, I think, in Rush's life as well that he's sort of conveniently overlooking at this stage. He also made it his vocation. So let's be honest. Rush made this his vocation. He decided to quit his job and go travel the world and write books based on how easy it was to get laid in different countries, and left the United States so that he could do such. I don't know what his success rate was when in the United States, but it was probably a whole lot higher in Brazil, Paraguay, Iceland, Poland, whatever. I can't even remember the rest of the book. So that's, I think, is really the sex profited him quite a bit because that's what he made his money off of. That's where in fact, I can remember back in 2015 when he was coming out against the red pill and then re-embraced the red pill. That's what he was saying, is that this was his life's work. And I can show you the video where he says, this is my life's work. This is what I've been about for a long time, blah, blah, blah. Now, granted, he probably has had a change of heart, but the fact that he's saying like it was his sinful state and he was enjoying it, or he could enjoy life with the rest of his sexually active peers. This is a mistake that I think that a lot of guys who are sort of outside the club, like the getting laid club, let's just say, tend to make with the guys who are on the inside. They think that, like, for a lot of guys who have trouble getting laid or have trouble solving their reproductive problem, there comes a point where the guys who are doing it, the guys who are having the sex that they would like to have, that they are continually reminded that they would like to be having it because they're constantly watching pornography or in various forms. I'm not saying it's all hardcore stuff, but they're constantly reminded of that. And so after a while, the more moralistic of them, the more, let's say, morally conscientious of them, tend to turn that into sort of the out group versus the in group. So the in group is the guys who are getting laid, and the guys who are the out group are the guys who are struggling with it and trying to figure things out. Now, I think what's interesting about this is he says, well, I learned game and suddenly I lost my virginity within a year. So game does work. So and again, this is not a cut on morality or ethics or anything like that. I'm just analyzing the in-group versus the out-group, sort of like the social dynamics that goes along with this. Because if you look at this from an evolutionary perspective, this is what beta males do with alpha males, is they form coalitions to take down the alpha male. Now, that's harder to do in the internet age when the in-group is huge and the out-group is also huge. It's not just one guy that a bunch of guys have to take down. It's guys who are successful with women versus the guys who are not successful with women. And what will they do to disqualify the kind of sex or the sex that those guys are having? Like, oh, they're having meaningless sex. Or, boy, I wouldn't want to be them. Or if it's not directed at the guys who are having sex, or usually it's this, and another one is this, they want to disqualify that guy because he has to be a manipulator. There has to be some game. There has to be some gimmick. There has to be some manipulating, like psychological manipulative skill that this guy is using. And it's these pure virginic girls who are the victims of these cads, right? These wolves in sheep clothing who come in there and they in some way gaslight the girls, right? And the girls fall in love with them, and they, suddenly, 1 week they're into having sex with the alpha guy, and then for 3 weeks, they go back to these guys and cry on their shoulders. And they wonder why that pure good woman is not going for them and keeps going back to the alpha. Well, we can explain, I've explained that one in so many different ways. I'm not going to cover that right now. But the sort of the fallout that comes from that is guys usually do one of two things. The guys who are sort of on the out group, the sexless guys versus the guys who are getting sex, they do one of two things. The first one is they blame the guy. This is the Elliot Rodgers theory, right? Is they blame the alpha Chad that he's just, I'll never be that. And so what they do is they say, well, it's unfair that he got this, or he won the genetic lottery, or just like add whatever excuse you want to add on to that. And at the end of the day, it's like these guys just are simply on the out group and those other guys are in the in group. So, but they can't hate them for too long because they know that they too want to have sex. And so then what happens is the second side of that is they get very angry at women. That women say one thing and then you do another. And there's that. I think when guys are younger, this is more significant and maybe less so now because we have the internet, because we have the red pill and because we have more understanding of this. But I think most guys right now who, like, we would say, well, they're angry at women or who hurt you. Those guys who I'll say vilify women, but are happy when women get their comeuppance. I talked about this in the revenge show. Like, they're happy when they get their comeuppance. They're happy when a woman hits the wall. And I'm going to do a show about the wall at some point too, a more an in-depth one about the wall. But they're happy when that woman gets to, that's the red meat for the red pill, right? They're happy when that woman is 35 years old and complaining that she can't find a nice guy, or she's so good looking that at 35 that guys just are intimidated by her or whatever. You know, like guys will just, they'll look for instances where their suspicions or their, I don't say, again, angst, where that angst is sort of redirected and they think that, well, if I can't have her, at least I can sort of like feel good about her getting her comeuppance. It's that revenge motive. It's why pro-revenge is such a big deal on like Reddit. I don't know if, like, I know Reddit just did a purge too. I sincerely doubt they got to pro-revenge, but maybe they did. I don't know. Anyways. So those are usually the two places that guys go, and you get into this sort of vicious cycle, I think, because you get into the point where you're like, I'll never be that guy, and women aren't what they say they are or what I would like them to believe they are. That idealism, that male idealism that comes out. And so you get in sort of this vicious cycle. I understand that. I get it. And it is only reinforced in a new order where pornography is ubiquitous, free, and it's in your face 24/7 because that's what you're always on. All right. So upon receiving the grace of God, I ceased all sexual activity. I don't look at porn or even sexy lingerie images. I don't masturbate and definitely don't fornicate. If sexual thoughts attack my mind, I pray to Jesus to take them away, and he does. The closest I get to sex today is the occasional sex dream, but even in my dreams, I've developed willpower to usually say no to the flesh that is offered to me. Aren't I suffering like the days I was in a virgin in my school? Aren't I in the utmost pain from my unmet sexual desire? The answer is no, because I've attacked the root cause of sexual pain, lust. Now, this is where I wanted to go with this. I won't read the rest of this whole thing to you, but this is where I wanted to get to today, because this is key. This is a key element to why men need sex. Okay, so the root cause of his sexual pain was lust, right? Take away the lust, which is amplified in our pornographic culture, and you take away the ache and the desire. Okay, so what Rush has just said here has been something that's been repeated, I think, at least since I started writing in what we now call the manosphere. Certainly had I bet I could do this. I bet I could go back to So Suave and I could probably find the sort of cessation of desire as a motivator. Or whatever, like he calls this lust, right? Honestly, I think lust is a healthy aspect of human nature. It's just, it can be taken to a point where it becomes something that is destructive rather than constructive. So yes, it's very easy to say, well, we're constantly kept in this state of lust. We're constantly kept in this state of perpetual stimulation, sexual stimulation. We're constantly, guys, because that sedates us. I've said this before, pornography is sedation. It's sedation, but it's sedation after the fact, not before the fact. It is heightened stimulus. It is amplification, right? It is, it's an amphetamine, right? Before it's a depressant. And I think that might be a good way to put it. But that lust, that desire to have sex as a guy, the higher libido, your testosterone-inspired higher libido is something that is a natural part of your body, is a natural part of you as a guy. Men want sex more than women do. Sorry. I know that myth is out there. I know the idea is that, women are just as sexual as men, and if we just didn't repress them, they would be just as sexual with us. If we could just see past our patriarchal, oppression and repression of their desire. Not in 2020. Okay. Not in 2000, not even in 1995. Okay. Like the last 25 years. You don't get that anymore, ladies. You don't get the we're held back anymore. Because you're not. All you have to do is go look at OnlyFans or whatever. Go look at the cam girls. You don't get that anymore. Sorry. We realize that women have been sexually liberated since the sexual revolution, progressively, and then amplified and probably accelerated even more since 2000 when we had the internet and we had the globalization of culture. But he is correct that there is male lust. And what I think is funny is like when we talk about lust, I really think it's like, he already said this, is actually, he includes this too, says you take away ache and desire. That's a very kind of Zen principle. That's an idea that like, maybe I'm going to butcher this, but like it's a Buddhist principle, or it's a Taoist principle where you remove desire and then you reach nirvana, you reach enlightenment, right? And that is something that I think is sort of counter to our basic human evolved natures. We want to get laid. We're driven to get laid. And I put this in my show notes here, and this probably will be the one that stands out to you the most. And I'll have to put if you guys want me to give you the actual research link for this, I will. But I have seen at least 2 different studies that show that neurologically, male animals, including humans, male mammals, prioritize sex before they prioritize food in the hierarchy of what's more important to them. So, in theory, it should stand to theory that reproduction is of a higher order need than actual food and sustenance. So sending your genetic material into perpetuity, right? Your genetic legacy outweighs your need as a human male or as a mammal male it overrides food. It overrides sustenance. That's not to say food's not important. It is, but I think it's always fun to sort of compare our desire and our need for food with our need for sex. Because food is something that we kind of, if we have access to it, we'll get fat. Now, in our evolutionary past, and our ancestral past, and our hunter-gatherer days, food was scarce. We didn't have McDonald's. We didn't have Taco Bell, right? We didn't have whatever your favorite close fast food is. Now food is abundant, at least in most industrialized countries anyway. Put it this way. Food is more abundant than it's ever been before. Even in really depressed third world countries, it's still more abundant than it was back when we were, killing caribou and, hunting for berries, whatever. So our biology is reflective of that. So when we get hungry and when we eat, or when we prefer certain foods, like you don't have to convince a baby that sweet foods are great and they prefer sweet foods because they're high energy content, right? I mean, they're high glucose content. And so back in the day, if you had the energy to go hunt longer, well, that was good, right? If you had the energy to get away from a predator, that was good. So therefore, like sweets, like sweet fruits and things like that were prioritized. So it makes sense. I mean, this is just me spitballing here, but it makes sense that a high calorie or energy dense food would be preferable to a lower energy food. And that's what we didn't know anything about nutrition back then. We've studied it since and we understand, but that's why we have that, or salt, right? Why do we crave certain things with salt in it? Well, salt's a necessary thing that we have to have in our bodies. So we have to figure out, why do we have a craving? Well, that's why. Why do we have a craving for sex? Why do we prioritize? Why do men prioritize sex at a higher rate or a higher priority, let's say, than women do? Or why do men's sexual strategy differ from women's? It seems like it would be better if it was cooperative, right? It would seem like it would be better if we could just say, hey, okay, if you had this rational conversation with, hey, I find you attractive. Do you find me attractive? Yeah, okay, let's have babies together. Oh, well, that would work out great, wouldn't it? But that's not how it works, because our natural evolved way of having sex, or our evolved mating strategies, are at odds with women, and it has to be. And it has to be that way for a lot of different reasons. For making a newer and stronger human in the next generation, a more durable human, a more pathogen resistant human in the future. I went and looked at, there's another study, and I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. It was about a week ago I saw this. There was another study about how women's eggs can select for differing sperm. And it's not like it actually selects the sperm. It will slow down the less preferable sperm. So it sends out some kind of protein, or so, like the female human ovum will send out some kind of chemical or some kind of, I want to say it's a protein that will slow down less desirable sperm in favor of more desirable sperm. Now, what all the researchers don't want to talk about is, why are there multiple men's sperm in the same site of fertility? Well, that's because women and human beings are promiscuous, and that's how things work. Our monogamy and our raising children is almost like the raising and the nurturement of the next generation is almost a separate strategy from the reproductive strategy, from solving the reproductive problem. Now, of course, we're human beings, and we have social issues, and we're social conventions, and you've got to make sure things work out the way they do, because men have their own, priorities and want to know that the kid is theirs, and women want to have, alpha seed and beta need. Right? They want the guy who is the best specimen, the best like physical specimen, and the best provisioning guy, the guy who can meet you with the most security, long-term security, whether that's protection or provisioning or whatever else. That's more like hypergamy, right? It's women's innate mating strategy. So our innate mating strategy, men's innate mating strategy, is different than women's. So how do men affect that? How would they have done that in the past? Well, it would have to be through having an intense, high capacity, high efficiency libido. And what we call lust, in fact, I would say this is a lot of the things that we want to call sin today. And I'm going to get a little philosophical here, because I am writing book 4, and I've talked about this, and this is in book 4, is that a lot of the things that we consider like the 7 deadly sins, for example, are, I'm going to click out of this because I want to get down serious here. There we go. A lot of the deadly sins that we talk, and I see Colleen, I see your super chat there. A lot of the things that we consider like the 7 deadly sins are really beneficial to us from an evolved perspective. So when we talk about like greed, like remember that in Wall Street, greed is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Yeah, it does. It actually does. It promotes your interests. It promotes you and hopefully your family's interests too. I mean, if you extrapolate that. So, gluttony is not necessarily good for you, but it's a sin, but it's part of human survival adaptations, right? When we see, like I've used this before, we see the big apple versus the little kind of worm-eaten apple. Which one, we human beings, with pattern recognition, which one is the one that's going to benefit me the most? The big apple that looks juicy and ripe and everything. I'm going to eat that one in preference to this one. That's me saying, okay, well, that benefits my survival the most as a human being. I take that to its extreme, and now it's gluttony. Sex, lust. Well, what's lust? The lust is basically your drive as, wanting to reproduce, wanting to reproduce with someone so greatly that you'll do things that are antisocial. That's where it really comes from. So when we're looking at things like terms like lust, that I wanted to kind of carry this out, because I said I don't want to berate Rush's religious perspective here, but I think that a lot of the stuff that he's talking about here, he gets into a little bit more about like how he thinks that guys should just remain virgins and until you get into marriage, and that's kind of like, I could very easily just sit here and do a whole show where I'm going, well, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous today because marriage is not what it used to be, and of course the God debate is going to be, or you can't debate God, right? Well, God says that's what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to wait until the perfect woman falls in your lap, or the preordained woman that you're supposed to sort of forgive her past indiscretions. She falls in your lap, and you live happily ever after. As an aside, I think that Rush is in the position that he's in right now because he retarded his own maturity. He retarded his own growth, I think, as a man, as a human being, a human male. I think he's like 40. He might be 41 right now. I'm not really sure. Never been married, no kids, and likely will not get to that point because of the choices and the decisions that he's made throughout his life. Okay, that's that. He made his bed and he's going to lie in it. And I hope it doesn't work out that way. I hope he finds somebody. I hope he, finds his perfect little virgin wife. And I think that's kind of like, it's interesting to me because I hear this a lot from other guys too. And it's not just Rouge. It's like tradcons and it doesn't. You don't even have to be like a super orthodox, conservative, traditional religious guy. There's this want for a virgin bride, and I think that's kind of interesting too because it is sort of the want for a virgin bride is really, on a man's part, I think, is a psychological need to know with 100% certainty that the child is yours. It's all about that drive for paternity, or the certainty of paternity. So when we say, well, I need an unspoiled virgin who's never known a man. In fact, we see this in the Old Testament in the Bible, right? Well, kill all the men folk in that tribe, kill all the boys, kill all the women who've known a man, but keep the unspoiled virgins for yourself. Why? Why would that be the preference? Well, in primates, that's what we do, right? We kill off the offspring of our rivals. We kill off our rivals, and we keep the unspoiled incubators of the next generation for ourselves so that we can send our genetic legacy into perpetuity. That's how it works. That's the nuts and bolts, evolutionary nuts and bolts of it. That's what that is. So when guys say, well, I'm going to stay a virgin and I want a virgin myself and nothing else will do. Remember when Tim Tebow said that? people were like, get out of here. Yeah. And I know he just got married too. And I was looking at some of the pictures and some of the tweets and everything. And I go, yeah, that's about what I expect from the guy. But you can't say anything. You can't say anything about that. You can't besmirch the moral conviction. Because if you do, then you're part of the problem. Then you're part of that Western culture problem, right? Then if you're in any way realistic, it makes it sound as if you are endorsing degeneracy. Well, he shouldn't be a virgin. He should go get laid. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that's in this day and age, it's a little bit naive. It's really kind of naive to think that you're going to be able to find a virgin bride. I understand the want for it. I also I wanted to say this too. This was actually a point on my notes here today. Is let me just finish out the lust part. I think lust is really sort of a reproductive, from an evolutionary perspective, is a reproductive necessity. I think more children have been conceived out of lust than out of love. in world history. I say this all the time. I said the best sex that a married man is going to have, or a guy who's like, let's say in a LTR, a long-term relationship, the best sex you're going to ever have is not you're going to have good sex before you become a couple, but the best sex you're going to have after a couple is the times where you almost broke up. It's not the times where you had date night and you planned this perfect, evening at the steakhouse and wine and roses and the jacuzzi suite. That's not where you're going to have your best sex. The best sex is when you go, I'm out of here, forget you. And you slam the door and you come back, a day later or 2 days later. And she's like, I'm sorry. And you're like, all right. And then that urgency returns. That lust returns. Mystery was saying this. This is something that pickup artists. I am not a pickup artist. Something that Mystery had said, and I tend to agree with this, and I probably should explore this a little bit more. But Mystery once said that a woman cannot feel genuine attraction for you, and I would carry that in and say love for you, until she feels jealousy for you as a guy. She has to feel like has a risk of loss. Because when a woman feels jealousy for a guy, she has some value. She has some sort of invested value in that guy. So and of course, Mystery takes this and he turns it into a way to sort of turn it into a game and sort of a manipulative tactic and one that works. when you are with your primary target, with your one girl. And he said the ones that really sort of latched onto him and really connected with him and really were like what Nick Krauser will call deep conversion, those girls who turned into the ride or die girls. In each case, what he had done at that point is he had introduced that woman to another woman who was also interested in him at the same time. Now, it's not like, hey, it wasn't like this overt thing. It was just like, hey, this is so-and-so. And then let sort of women's competition take place. And when your primary girl feels jealousy, that's when you have that sort of solid attachment. And as twisted as that sounds and as manipulative as that sounds, that's human nature. That's certainly women's nature. Got to feel something. Got to feel some sort of jealousy. I'm not saying that doesn't work for men. It might also work for men. I certainly would say it works for beta men. I think most beta guys who are very possessive, who are very, mate guarders, right? I mean, really like reflexive mate guarders, those guys. I think that a lot of those guys, that jealousy, well, first of all, I think jealousy comes from a different place for women than it does for guys. Jealousy comes from the place, for men, jealousy comes from the place of mate guarding and ensuring paternity. I don't want her leaving the house, because if she leaves the house, she might bang some other guy and come back with his kid and try to pretend that it's my kid. Maybe that's not what they're like cognitively, front brain rationalizing, but it's what the hindbrain is rationalizing. That's what the hindbrain says. No, you're mine. Like when I was talking about like body language mastery, right? When I was talking about like the pictures where you see the guy who's got this kind of arm bar almost over his girlfriend, or he's got her, I don't know if you see this, he's got his arms around her, and those physical manifestations right there of, you won't say, well, that guy's a jealous guy, but you see this as almost like this reflexive default posture of guys who have a similar understanding or have a similar way of dealing with women. And it's usually, this is mine, guys. That's really where monogamy comes from, is sort of this, I don't say it's possessive so much as it is an insurance against being cuckolded, an insurance against knowing or certainty that the child is theirs. And that's a drive. I don't think people really fully appreciate that. That's part of that. But to get to that, to get to the point where we're even doing that, or you have that investment into that woman, that feeling of jealousy, that has to come after the guy has in some way, made a claim, right? Maybe they've had sex. Maybe they've had lust together, right? Maybe whatever. But that guy, that's how important sex is to guys. That's why you need sex, right? Why would you? That's the reproductive side of all of this. So when I say to guys, I say this, when I say you need sex, guys will lose their minds, because they will say, well, you don't really need sex because it's not like oxygen, it's not like water, it's not like food. Yeah, but your brain has evolved to prioritize sex before food. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean you can live without it. Or what Roosh was saying here just a moment ago is that, he's so much happier now because he's able to turn off his lust. He's able to turn off his libido. And I've asked this, and I'm getting back to the point, I asked this way back in the day. This was back in 2002 on SoSuave. I think I put out a poll or something on SoSuave one time. I said, if there was a magic pill that you could take that would entirely kill your libido as a guy, like you no longer have to worry about, you'll never want to watch porn again. You don't care about, like, the hottest girl can walk by naked and you're just like, whatever, would you take that pill? If you could turn off your libido as a guy, would you do it? And I was actually shocked. And this was back in 2002, 2004. When I put this out, I was shocked at the return of so many guys saying, yeah, I would do it. Where can I find it? Like they believed that I had some. I'm like, I don't got anything like that. But it's like, that's the level of, I don't say obsession, but that's the level of, I don't know, like just angst, right? They think that if I could just turn this off, if I could just stop thinking about sex, if I could just, like, when you talk about nofap and when you start talking about like, pornography's bad or changes your brain waves or whatever, changes the way you think about things. And there might be something to that, but the answer isn't turning it off. The answer isn't killing it, because that drive, that sex drive, that libido, the process and the way that we go about trying to solve our reproductive problems, that is what leads men. You want to know why men are idealistic? That's why. Because they're like, well, I'm not getting laid. Well, what else am I going to do? Where's that energy coming from? I think it was Sigmund Freud said this. He says, all energy is sexual. And I don't mean that in terms of like, woo, energy. It's all motivation, let's say. All incentive is sexual. So when guys can't solve their reproductive problem, they will channel the energy, or they'll channel that incentive, or they'll channel that drive into other things. So sometimes that's art, right? So that's music, right? I like all the rockers that I used to know did the same damn thing. Shit, that was why I did it, right? I mean, it's like, okay, well, I'll, I didn't want to save to bed. I wanted to get laid. It certainly wasn't the money back in the day. When I was playing in the Hollywood metal scene of the late 80s and early 90s, I didn't get in. I mean, I love the music, don't get me wrong. I like performing, I like showing off. That was fun. But it wasn't the money, because there was no money. I lived like a dog for probably about 3 or 4 years, right? And I didn't need money. Honestly, I did not need any money. I made just enough to sort of get by and keep myself alive. And, I had dreams. I was hoping to turn it into something a little bit more. The fact of the matter is I wanted to get laid. I wanted to solve my reproductive problem. And once I figured it out, I did quite well doing that as often as I could. And it wasn't because I wanted to feel good about myself. It wasn't because there was all these guys who were getting it and I wasn't. So I wanted to go do it too. I've been getting laid since I was 17. Like I had my first real girlfriend. I had sex when I was 17 years old. And you know what? When I had sex, it wasn't some cause, like the clouds didn't part and the sun didn't shine down. Oh, you just got laid. And I didn't go, oh man, I feel horrible about myself. I didn't think that at all. And I didn't go, yeah, man, Bond, James Bond. I didn't do that in the mirror. I didn't do anything like that. I just, what I did is I wrote about this too, as you'll see it in one of the essays. Just toweled off the equipment and went down 7-Eleven, got a big gulp. It was good. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I wanted to come back and do it again. And I did. And that was pretty much it. It wasn't like, I get it when guys will say, well, you're having meaningless sex. That was meaningless. I meant to have sex with her. I wanted to. It was enjoyable. I've said this before, like my notch count is public knowledge. Okay. So I'm right around a little bit more than 40. Let's just round it off. Let's just say 43, 42, 43. And of those women, and that, and some guys will say, oh, just 40. And other guys will be like, oh, I can't believe it. Of those women, I think I can, there might be 2 that I regret having sex with. And that was only not because of the sex itself. The sex itself with the girl that I regretted with was fantastic. It was awesome. I was into it. It was what happened afterwards. It was the consequences that came after that. It was the dealing with that person after that. And so as far as applying meaning or whatever to sex, I have always been sort of or validation. Like guys will say, well, you just want to feel validated, or you want to be in the cool clubs, or cool kids club. I'm a guy and I want to get laid. That's welcome to planet Earth as a human male. When you start adding more like esoteric stuff to it and all of this, meaning, well, I pity being you. I wouldn't want to, like when I said that, when I copped to that on Pat Campbell's terrestrial radio show, people lost their minds. Well, you're a man whore. Those guys have got triple digits. They think I'm weak. They think I'm a chump because I only got to 40 before I got married, or a little more than 40 before I got married. And then if you say that, and I've been run up the flagpole for this as well, is that if you go and if I go and I say, well, I've had 42, 43 women in my life, you'll get one of 2 responses. You'll get the moralist response, which is, oh, that's horrible. I can't believe it. You're a man whore. You're having meaningless sex. That's number 1. That's default response number 1. That's 1. Number 2 is, you're humble bragging. You're telling us because you just want to show off. And you know where that comes from? It comes from the same place that Roosh was talking about, like being in the cool kids club. So if I say I've had more sex than you, And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But if I say that, then the competitive side, I think the dominance hierarchy side of men's nature comes out. If I say I'm reproducing more than you are, or I'm having sex more than you are, I might not have as many children as you, but women like me more than you. Like that's what you're basically saying to that kind of mentality. And so people think you're trying to gloss yourself, or and I'm like, oh, that's just the facts. That's just what I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you guys the truth here. And it's hard. You can't, there's always going to be sort of like, for guys who aren't getting laid, everybody else is getting laid. And once you solve that, once you get to that once you've had sex and you're having it regularly, you kind of solve the mystery of sex until you get married. Or if you haven't had a lot of sex and then you do get married, thinking that you're going to have more sex because you're married, and then you figure out you don't. That's rough on guys who were not really, who lived in scarcity mode, right? Who lived in a sense of sexual scarcity for most of their lives. And most of those guys believe that sex is something that is transactional and rather than like validational. And by validational, I mean like women have a genuine desire to have sex with certain guys. Like those are the guys they break rules for. Hot guy in the foam cannon party. Those guys. So that's when it comes to men's sexual nature, it's dangerous right now. I'm not going to say it's not. A lot of guys are probably going to watch this and they're going to go, I can't believe it. He's trying to tell us to go out there and try to get after it. I can't believe it. You're going to get us in trouble. We're going to get Me Too'd. We're going to go to jail. We're going to get sexual harassment. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm not saying that the environment is much different right now. I got it. But that doesn't excuse you from the fact that you would say, oh, I want to take a pill that would remove my libido. That would solve the problem. And then the mystery of sex wouldn't make any difference. So, and I won't read the rest of this because it's just, it's kind of like an exercise, I think, in just sort of like rationalizing why he felt bad, like why Roosh felt bad about, like he regretted having a lot of sex, and maybe he had more sex than me. Who knows, right? I don't know what his notch count is. I would say that probably by reading, he has a really great book. If you ever read Roosh's books, if you can still find them anywhere, the two that I suggest the most, there's one, and you probably never, it was just kind of a sleeper for him, but he had a great book called 30 Bangs. And it was like how he got laid with 30 different girls and the process that he went through for each one of them. And then he had another one called Pussy Paradise, Poosy Paradise. If you can find either one of those are way better than any. I think those are probably his best work. And I think Pussy Paradise was the first one, or excuse me, the last one he did before he kind of had his conversion. And I think if you read Pussy Paradise, it will educate you in the I guess the global kind of global sexual market shift that he was experiencing at the time, but didn't realize it until probably now he realizes it. But those are really good books. So I will give Roosh, I'll give you a plug, right? I thought those are really brilliant books. Because they are descriptive, because they define the process, and not just the process of getting laid, but also the process of going from one kind of in social context into where we're at now in a social context. So let me pick up a couple of these really quickly here. Colleen says this. She says, Rollo, thank you for speaking to the revenge element present in so much of Red Pill philosophy. One of the reasons I listen to you is that you stick to empirical evidence and don't become toxic. Yeah, I understand that too, because I understand why guys get angry. Don't get me wrong. I get the revenge impulse. And I don't even really like to call it revenge, because it's not even so much revenge. It's not like these guys are like planning or plot. I mean, maybe some of them are, but it's not like they're radicalized and they're, oh, we hate all women. We're going to drive a truck down the middle of the street and see how many girls we can hit. That like guys don't do that. But what they do is they look for those stories that will sort of reinforce their own narrative, their own personal narrative, their own, well, I'm a loser. Oh yeah. Well, at least I'm not this much of a loser. or I'm a loser, but this girl got hers. And I was thinking about, I'm probably going to do a full episode about this, but I have my my upcoming post, not the one that I have right now, but my upcoming post on The Rational Male, my blog, is going to be sort of a revisiting of the wall. And I think a lot, like, I'll just give you a quick preview. I think a lot of guys are either too happy or they're too mad about the wall. They're too happy because they think that when a woman gets to be like 33, she's at the wall, man, she's never going to find any love, right? And maybe they're right, because I've been doing, for book 4, I've been doing a lot of statistical analysis with respect to how women in the future, I think by 2030, Morgan Stanley said that something like 52% of women will be unmarried between the ages of 15 and 50, I think. 52% by 2030 will be unmarried and no kids, never have, and never been married, never married, right? Or maybe divorce comes in there somewhere, but will be unmarried. And what's crazy is you get things like Forbes and you get things like Morgan Stanley, of course, and they're planning for this. They're aligning their products, and they're aligning their commercial interests and the way that they're going to market to women in the future according to the fact that women will statistically, 52% of women will statistically be single. They'll be the cat ladies, right? They'll be the spinsters. And guys get too happy about that. Well, if I'm not getting laid, at least they're not. Like that's that I'm too happy about it. Or they'll get too mad about it. Right? They'll be like, well, this is the end of society. This is the end of the world. Or they'll be like, well, or they'll say this. They'll say, well, this is how they get mad about it. They'll go, women can still have, like I saw, here's an example. Before I screw this up, somebody sent me this article, and this is one of the things that inspired me to write about it. Sent me this article of this woman who's 60 years old. And I think she is in Kansas City or something. She's in the United States. This took place in the U.S. Woman who's in her 60s. They don't say anything whether she was divorced. They just say she has 2 kids. And she's also a grandmother at 60 years old. And she looks kind of young. Like maybe she could pass for like an early 50s. And she's thin enough, but she still looks like she's 60. She still looks kind of old, but like, I can see why a guy who would be desperate would get into it. Well, it turns out she ended up hooking up with this guy who's like 23 years old. And they decided to get married. Like he proposed to this 60-year-old woman. And, the article, I think it's in like the Daily Caller or something, like, I forget which one it was, but they were going saying, well, her friends and her family don't approve and his family don't approve, but it's all for love, right? Yeah, they're following their heart. These crazy kids. She's 60 and he's 23. Let's wish them well. That kind of nonsense, right? Well, the reason I was sent that was because guys were using this to say, Rollo, it doesn't matter if you're 60 years old. These girls can still get a guy who's 23 years old. Like this one apex example of like one 60-year-old woman who's, blonde hair. This looks okay, for a 60-year-old. She's not 23. But here's an example. It's like that same example. It's almost exactly same example as Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher. It's just the reverse, right? Like women go, well, look, there's hope for us. There's hope for us gals. Well, it's the reverse, right? Now it's a 60-year-old with a 23-year-old guy, and they go, now it's the MGTOWs, or not, now it's black pill. No, not MGTOWs. Black pill guys are sending this to me going, see, it doesn't matter how alpha you are. It doesn't matter about anything. Girls are 100% in control of everything. The whole sexual marketplace is their oyster. The world is their oyster. And they can do, all they got to do is spread their legs and there'll be a 23-year-old guy to come and bang them. What do you have to say about that, Rollo? I'll have to say about that is that is a rare outlier today. And the reason why you can see that is because we live in the new order. And you're if you go fishing for exactly the thing that you're looking for, you're probably going to find it. So what is statistically, how rare is that? I don't know. Well, yeah, you're right. You don't know. So is it because maybe it's because she still looks semi-passable. Maybe the guy's desperate. What's the context here? But you're going to use that as sort of the flip side. Like there's the guys who are too angry about it and then the guys who are too happy about it. And so when I'm writing this and I'm getting into like the wall and stuff like that, that's what I'm going to get into. There's your preview probably for Sunday's show. So anyways, you're welcome, Colleen. Who else did I miss here? Dumb and Low, I will get to you, dude. I will. I promise, dude. Sorry, I'm busy writing a book. William. Oh, excuse me. That's not William. I got to go back one more here. I don't know when Pat's going to come back, dude. I really wish I did. Do introvert? Sorry, this is Sharaith MJ says, do introverts have more chance of becoming beta males due to their lack of social skills? Well, when it comes to introversion and when it comes to extroversion, I'm of the opinion that this is kind of nature and nurture. A lot of guys will say, well, I'm just a natural introvert. There might be some truth to that, but you can, that's, even if that is your sort of firmware, you can override that with software, right? You can override that with your nurturing. So, can you learn social skills? Sure. There's a lot, a lot of people think that just because I do this show or whatever, like I'm sort of this natural extrovert. And I like to perform and I like to show off. Don't get me wrong, I do. But I also like to write, and I also like to do things in this studio that I don't. Some days I just simply don't leave this studio. Does that make me an introvert? Yeah, no. I think guys kind of go through maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to get into trouble by saying this, because a lot of guys who are introverts are very invested in their introversion. You never hear guys go, I'm an extrovert and I'm so into being an extrovert and I love being an extrovert. You don't hear them saying that because they're busy doing things. They're busy out there doing extrovert things, right? Introverts go, I'm an introvert and nobody really understands me, but please try to understand me. I'm at a party and I'm not really social, so come over here and talk to me. It's not a disability, dude. It's not introversion is not a disability until you make it one, until you think that it's like sort of your identifier. So I think, I don't know, maybe this is just me. I can be introverted, but I can also be extroverted. So I think it's sort of something. I don't think, here's one thing that I've always had a real problem with is when it comes to personality. When I was in college and I was, doing my psychology work, it was behavioral psychology, but it was also with an emphasis on personality studies. And one thing I will tell you is personality is not static. I know that for a fact. People who get PTSD, their personality is definitely not static. They were one person when they went off on deployment and they came back from military deployment and they're a different person. Personality is not static. So, do they have a chance? What'd you say? Becoming beta males? I don't say that. I don't think that you don't have to necessarily be. Just because you are an introvert or an extrovert, I think we tend to associate extroversion with alphas, but there's extroverted betas. There's definitely extroverted gammas, right? I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Let's just say that. William Money says, isn't there some insight to be learned from Rush's gaming experiences? Yes, that's why I gave you those books as examples, particularly 30 Bangs. That is, I think, from a nuts and bolts perspective, that's his best work. He said over time, it left him feeling empty, chasing one high after another. I'm sure it did, because, okay, so I didn't finish this thought, William, so thank you for reminding me. One thing that I think is when I wrote Preventive Medicine and I was tracking sort of like what it is that women are prioritizing in their attraction or their arousal or whatever, in like the guys that they want to get with when they're like, say, 18 to 25, or the epiphany phase, like 29 to 31, or after that, maybe like, well, she's post-wall. Well, we'll talk about that later. But like, say 30 to 38, 38 to 45, 45 to 55, like those, like the different stages of maturity. I'm looking at those things looking at it from the female point of view, and I'm going, okay, what is it that women are going through, and what can guys expect, and what can they plan ahead for? Well, there's a similar pattern or similar path or timeline. Like I actually graphed it out as a timeline in the book. There are similar things that guys go through or should be going through at different stages of their own maturity. And I think we've thrown that out of whack, certainly within the last 50 years. Since the sexual revolution, we have completely thrown that out of whack. So, like, one of the stats that I'm looking at right now, because I'm writing a section in the book there is a section in the book about marriage, it's about religion and how different religions understand marriage and how marriage is sort of a human thing. But the stats are this, is that if you lived in 1970, I don't know how old you are, but if you were 22 years old, you'd already been married. What was it? 70%. And this was like 1972, 1973, 70% of 25-year-old people were married or they were living in their own family, like a family they created by 25. Today, that percentage is 20%. So it has dropped from 70% to it's dropped a full 50% up to 2020 right now. And that was sort of what I was going to get into in this next article here that David J. Lay gave us. But those stats, I mean, we're pushing marriage back further and further. We are, and like guys will say, well, this is the Lost Boys generation. These guys are, or if you listen to traditional conservatives, they'll say, well, these guys are delaying their maturity. They're delaying or they're trying to prolong their adolescence. They're kidults. Heard that one. I've heard that since 2012. These guys are Peter Pan boys, and they're not living up. They're not real men. They're trying to be, they're still playing video games at 30. They're living with their mom at 30 some odd years. And maybe there's some truth to that. Probably more truth now than there was when they started that. But yeah, that's it. And there are certain milestones in a man's life. And guys, certainly this generation, maybe the one prior to it, are not following. That's why guys like Jocko Willink or Jordan Peterson or myself even, or even Tony Robbins, like that. You want to know why why the hustle economy is so profitable? It's because those guys are, we're looking right now. I think what the oldest millennial right now is like 38. They're just this side of 40 right now. And if you look at Roosh is 40 or 41. So I don't necessarily know if he's a millennial. He might be like Generation Y, whatever that is. But still, what did Bruce do from the time he was 25 till he's 40? Get laid, right? That was his vocation. He quit his job to go write books, go write lay guides, to go to bang Sweden, bang Poland, bang Estonia. I don't know wherever else he went, Eastern Europe, Eastern Bloc countries. Yeah, that's what he did. And that's what he decided to do instead of, I'm going to do this for a little while until I find, I've said this before, and people will throw rocks at me about this. When I talk about spinning plates, if you actually go and read those essays and you read those parts in book 1 about plate theory, and there's 6 different essays about that, not one of them says, do this forever. Never have I said that. In fact, I've said that, you do this you spin plates, you date non-exclusively so that at some point what it is that you want out of life. What is like understanding women's nature. You want to know why most guys get into trouble when they get into marriage, when I'm living in a sexist marriage. I can't understand it. I was a virgin and she said she was a virgin and we got together and we did everything the right way. And now and they're just like, I have had, let's see, back in the mid 2000s when I was finishing college, I had men as old as like 45, 50 some odd years old crying because they're like, I don't know what she wants. If she would just tell me what she wants, I would do it. Tell me what you want. Tell me what I have to do. What do I have to do to make you love me? What do I have to do to get you to have sex with me? Let's go to counseling. Let's go do this. Let's go, I'll buy you this. I'll buy you that. We'll go on this vacation. If I have date night, I'm trying to keep it fresh. Why won't she have sex with me, Rollo? I don't understand. I'm doing everything the right way. I'm doing everything that anybody ever told me that I should do. And it's failing miserably. I have a sexless marriage and I can't get out of it because I had kids and now she doesn't want to have anything to do with me. Well, what? Yeah, as bad as that sounds, that guy still went through what you're supposed to go through, right? He maybe got married at 30 years old and now he's 40, now he's 45, and maybe he's miserable, or maybe he's not, right? But there's certain things that guys usually do is they'll go through their 20s. This was the usual plan, not so much anymore, but guys would go through their 20s, sow their wild oats, right? Have sex with maybe not 40 women, but maybe they have sex with the average, I think, which is seven sexual partners for average American man. And then they find the one, find the right girl. And then they settle down and they have kids and they go to church, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. Maybe they have a divorce. Well, Roosh bypassed all of that. He didn't even live in the United States. And so Roosh is the product of his own decisions right now. And whether that turned him insane or that maybe he's had a religious conversion, I don't know. I mean, you have to ask him about that. Well, can it be sincere? Yeah, it could. I just don't know. So I don't think religious conversions come as a result of taking shrooms for the first time. And I know because I've taken shrooms. Ask me about my drug experiences sometime. I'll tell you. Let's see. Chad Worthington says, if it drives, flies, floats, or rented. I'm trying not to swear on this one because I keep getting red flag. So if you are the YouTube censor, I did not say anything untoward. A foul. Nothing is a foul with this one. Doman Lowe says, I was really surprised that the latest massive Reddit purge didn't nuke the red pill for super ultra unacceptable wrong thing. How dare you? How dare you hate speech? Yeah, well, you know why? Because it's already quarantined, and it's been like we're coming up on 2 years of the quarantine of the red pill. Had it not been quarantined, it would probably be gone. It would already be out the door. In fact, I'm surprised it's not even still. But it's quarantined, and so it's probably under the radar. Well, that's quarantine. Let's go and let's get rid of the Donald or whatever. I don't even know. Most of it's politics. I think really, if Doman, if we had been in a position right now where we were, and I think we will get there, where we're getting into a gender war kind of thing, or we're getting into like the Women's March or something like that. That's probably when they'll dump it. They're probably saving the dump of the red pill for when the ladies put on the pink hats and start marching in the streets all over the world. Then they'll do it because it'll seem like, oh, well, we're doing our part. We got rid of those misogynists. They've been quarantined for 2 years, but we're getting rid of them. Yeah, that seems like, well, see what we did, ladies? You should love Reddit now. It's all clean for you. Come in here and talk about lady things. Colleen, I already talked to you. Mr. K, as a man with daughters, one daughter. How do you teach them about hypergamy? I'll tell you this, I'll be as brief as I can. I have told my daughter this. She already understands this, and she understands it instinctively. My daughter has actually read book 1. She kind of understands this instinctively, I think, but it's probably because I want to pat myself on the back, right? I want to think that it's because of my influence on her, but she will tell me that guy, this dude over here is alpha, and this guy, I don't want to get with him because he's kind of like, he's kind of weesh. He's kind of blue pill beta. She'll tell me that. I don't have to say anything. Like she'll just come up with that stuff. I have told her this though. I have said, like, you know, when you are 23, you will be at the top of your game, and you need to plan ahead for that. You need to invest in the best you're going to be doing is when you are about 23 years old, maybe 22, 23, 24. That's where I peg sexual market value peak. And I said, and use it, use that to your advantage. And then when you don't, then when you're done, find the right guy. Don't delay. I have told her this. I said, don't delay until your epiphany phase. I would be a very happy dad of a daughter if my daughter decided to get married at 26, maybe 27. That would be all right. I think I'd be okay with that. I realize that the sexual marketplace is a whole lot different than when I met my wife. So I've always been realistic about that, but that would make me feel good. Let's see. William Mooney again says, Roosh hasn't had a child or been married by 41. Therefore, he has retarded his growth. Maybe. Should that be a man's goal in your opinion? No, it doesn't have to necessarily be a man's goal, but most men reproduce. Guess what? Roosh and a lot of guys who are very anti-marriage and anti-kids and anti-sex and anti-everything else, a lot of those guys, I should say a lot of those, every one of those guys is the product of a father who successfully reproduced. So should that be your goal? It's been a goal, a reproductive problem for every man to walk planet Earth. And up until this point, including myself, well, I guess I've already completed my biological duties, right? Every guy on planet Earth who has a father or a grandfather or whatever is the product of successful reproduction. So is that a goal? Yeah, for some guys it is. For some guys it might not be. I think that societally, and I'm thinking not just Western society, I mean in our globalizing society right now, the fact that 52% of women are not going to be married and childless by 2030, imagine the effects that's going to have on not just the United States, but like in global society. Imagine where we're going to be at. Like we're in 2020 right now, and this has been a pretty chaotic year, but I think that's probably deliberately and intentionally so. But according to the sexual marketplace, like for what we see trends right now, I mean, Forbes and Morgan Stanley are planning for 52% of women to be single when they're, from the ages of 15 to 50. And they think that's a good thing. The articles are like Forbes articles I'm reading right now. They think that's great. Well, it's clearly a sign that women are advancing and they're empowered. What about the fertility rates? It doesn't matter. They're going to be spending a whole lot more money, and they'll have more money, and it's like remember when gay marriage was a thing, and suddenly they got it, and oh great, they're married, and you saw companies, and I don't want to get too political here, but like you saw companies turn on a dime, and I know because I was working for a company at the time that did this. It's called rainbow washing. It's not whitewashing or this washing or whatever. It's rainbow washing. And every company did it. And they did it because they understand that like homosexual individuals, which accounts for like a very minute fraction of the American population. It didn't matter because it was the hype. It was we're cool. We're on board. Here's our rainbow flag. Here's our rainbow this. Here's we cater to you kind of thing. Or here's our brand and it's gay friendly. It's not that it mattered so much to homosexuals. It mattered to the people who were on the side like that. That was the popular push right there. But those companies that planned ahead for that wanted to be a part of that. I mean, they knew that like homosexual couples usually didn't have kids, and what does that mean? Well, that means they have a lot more money. I forget what there's actually some kind of acronym for that, and I don't remember what it is, but they would say, was it single, no children or something like that? I can't remember what it is. So if they're doing it if they would do something like that, most like major multinational companies, let's just say, are advertising or using that as sort of their PR. And this was back in 2015. If they're using that, then and Morgan Stanley and Forbes and everybody else is saying it's the study was called this. It was from Morgan Stanley, and it was called The Rise of the She Economy, and how many women are going to be in the American workforce. Aaron Clary, how many women are going to be single when they get to be 35? What's their spending right now? Women control. They want to say, well, there's a wage gap. Well, that's nonsense, but women do control more money than men do. Spending, with females, at least in the United States, are the primary consumer in the United States. They control, again, these are stats that I'm using in book 4. They basically control all this. I would say the lion's share, let's just say, anywhere between 70 and 80, in some cases 90% of all spending done in the United States is done by women. So yeah, that's what they want. If you know more about them and say, well, they're going to be single, that's what you're going to plan for. And so they're already trying to position, like most companies are trying to position themselves for when that happens, because it's supposed to rise, like the percentage is supposed to rise from like 2.1% every year. So at some point, there's going to be more unmarried women than there are going to be guys out there. And in every single article that's a follow-up or that was attached to that study, everyone said it's a positive thing. It's great. It's awesome. This is a sign that women are empowered. They don't get married anymore. Like being single and a spinster is a sign of success. It means you're supposed to be happy without kids, or maybe you just had kids on your own, whatever. Freeze your eggs. That's part of freezing your eggs right now is part of, like, I don't know if Facebook does it. Google might do it too, but like big Fortune 500 companies, they offer egg freezing women, to female like management and hire, I think, as a benefits package. And don't worry, you focus on your career. It's okay. It's all good, ladies. You're going to spend all this money anyways, right? We're going to freeze your eggs for you until you find the right guy. Until you're successful in your career. Christian Matika says, why is so much human nature considered a sin? Because a lot of human nature can get out of hand. I've said this before about buffers, and I think if you read the first book and you read the chapter on buffers, I of course use that in the context of game. I use that in the context of meeting women and not being like beholden to text game or beholden to one thing, like over invested in, no, I'm going to type, I got rock solid text game. I met her on Tinder. And I understand that, that's the way people meet right now, but that over reliance on it is something that is what I call a buffer. Like it's a buffer against rejection. Well, the same concept of buffers applies to human nature and how we limit it, whether we limit it through religion or social stigmas or whatever, or, like somebody sent me I think it was a story from, let's say it's Nigeria or Kenya. I got a lot, by the way, all my brothers in Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana, greetings, MZ. Is that how you say it? MZ Tomassi, MZEE. Thank you. Much love to my African brothers. But they sent me this story about this guy who was a Christian missionary, I guess, or he was a youth pastor or something I want to say it was Kenya. It might have been Nigeria. And the guy was in his 50s and he was married to a woman who was 29, and he got home unannounced and found that she was in bed banging his friend from the church who was 32, and ended up killing that guy, not the woman, the guy. And so what is so as a result, people were sending me scriptures, because it was a religious thing. And they sent me this thing, and I don't remember the actual number, but it was in Proverbs, and it said something like, if a man finds his wife in bed with another woman, he's going to kill that guy. That dude's going to die, and no money and no reasoning is going to stop him. That I'm paraphrasing Proverbs there. It's actually something else, but that's the gist of it. And I was reading that and I go, yep, that's human nature and an attempt to either warn or to buffer against it. So when you look at, I always use the 7 deadly sins as sort of this benchmark, I guess, because it's easy to point out lust. It's easy to point out libido for guys. Whenever you see this has been my experience anyways, but when you are at when you listen to guys in evangelical churches or even maybe in some other churches too, when you listen to guys who talk about what their struggles are, 90% of the time it's going to be I struggle with pornography. 68% of Christian men report being addicted to pornography. There's another stat from book 4. And so why is that? Is it maybe because they believed in sort of repressing their sexual expression? Is it because they thought, well, I'm just going to stick it out and wait till God gives me sends my wife to my front doorstep? I'm sure you guys, I don't know. I'm going to get kind of specific here, but there's an old pastor. I don't know if he's still around. Maybe he is, but Pastor, was it Matt Driscoll? And, I can remember reading about this guy back in 2013, 2014, and Mark Driscoll, that's who it is. And how he thought he was doing everything right. And he was sort of one of these masculinity preacher guys, but he was very blue pill. But he's like, you guys need to man up and take care of these women and take care of single mothers. And how dare you touch her? And he thought he was in this relationship he thought he married, he thought his wife was a virgin, and then later found out that she had actually got with another guy before she got with him. And that kind of took the wind out of his sails kind of thing. And I talk about this in book 4 as well, is that a lot of guys, when it comes to religion, and I know I'm not just going to pick on Christianity here. It could be Muslim guys who are this way too, because I think Muslim guys are really sort of dedicated to no premarital sex. And that can cause a lot of problems in an age where we have instant access to sex all the time. And so there's been ways throughout history where we've found ways to buffer the worst of human nature. So the easy example of this is prior to the sexual revolution, if a woman had a child out of wedlock, that brought shame on her family. Like even, I'm not saying this is always the case, but even in Muslim cultures or Islam, honor killings. Well, why? But why would that even exist? Why would that be? That's horrible. I can't believe it. Well, because that woman, that girl, that daughter, whatever, brought shame on the family. That's the stigma. That's the buffer against that kind of behavior that a woman would naturally want to engage in, like hypergamy. We've said this before, like ever since the sexual revolution and the advent of hormonal birth control that puts the human reproductive process almost unilaterally in the hands of women, ever since those times, 1967, ever since then, we've seen what the outcome on society is as a result of empowering women with that, of removing those stigmas, of removing those limitations, removing those buffers that were placed on the worst aspects of women's reproductive nature, their sexual nature. We do the same thing for men. We do it, but we don't do it. We still, in fact, we repress men, I think, a whole lot more now because we've empowered women to the point where it's like, okay, well, ladies, you get to choose and we'll just sit here patiently and against the wall naked until you choose one of us. And you know what? So out of 10 of us, 2 of us will go home with you and the other 8 will go home and jerk off, right? That's basically what the power that we've given women in the global sexual marketplace right now. And we go, well, how come and the idea of a man stepping in to limit that today is abhorrent to like the things that we would have done, like the social stigmas for a woman to have had a child out of wedlock. That was abhorrent back in the day. Even the idea of like a sperm bank prior to like 1965 was just appalling to the societies that came before that. And they didn't really even know why. That's just how we do it. They didn't understand the latent purpose of those buffers that limited them from doing that, or the buffers that limit men's sexual expression. You can't just walk around with a heart on all the time. Johnny, you got to keep it in your pants. We still say that today. Well, if you could just keep it in your pants, then if you would let the big head do the thinking for the little head, then everything would be okay. It's your lack of judgment and your lack of self-control and your lack of personal responsibility, Johnny. We don't say any of that to a woman whatsoever. In fact, if we were to do that, we'd be thrown in jail. We'd be pilloried on YouTube, or pilloried on Twitter for even suggesting that we would in some way limit women's hypergamy or step in as men and say, you know what, we're going to take over the reproductive process here. We want some power in this as men, since we're contributing 50% of the genetic material that makes the next generation. Guess what? We are going to say, we want to put these limitations on it. We want to limit abortion. We want to limit whatever. We have several generations of men that wouldn't even be an afterthought. It wouldn't even pop into their brain, because that's where we're at. Because we're in a generation right now where we've taught men after generation of men that how dare you do that? How dare you suggest that? How dare you have standards? So that's how we buffer. We used to buffer human nature. We don't do it anymore. Well, we do, but we do it in different ways. We do it for one sex and we don't do it for the other sex. So that was Mr. Christian Matiko. Bharat Sharma says, does your wife know about yes, she does. She knows about my lay count. I'm asking because it defies your iron rule of number 2. Well, yes and no. She knows I've been with a lot of women. Maybe not the exact number, because I don't even know the exact number, to be honest with you. And that's not me like glossing, oh yeah, you're such a stud. It's just that like sometimes I'll think about, okay, like I've tried to sort of like go back in my head and like write down names and like occurrences and things like that. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, would I count that? Would I not count that? And so like I always come out at about like 40. But yeah, she knows that. And I'm not the guy that planted the flag on her vagina either. So it's not like she's had 40 guys, but, I think like guys have asked me this before. They said, well, what's your wife's notch count? Well, of the ones that I know, at least 4. So people will say, well, that must be 8. Okay. Well, I guess I'm ahead of the game with most women today. So, But I do know that we've been together for 24 years. We have a great family and we have a great life together. And so, again, I did what I did. She did what she did. Jamal Lode says, since we prioritize sex, are women right? Us being shallow. The shallow gambit. They always say we're the self-serving ones. We're the self-serving. And here's the thing, according to women's mating strategy, they're right. We're the self-serving ones. We're the shallow ones. Because the guys that they want to get with, the guys that they prioritize, like the 20%ers, right? The guys who are the alpha guys, that all women, like 100% of women are interested in banging the top 20% of guys. Those guys, if that's their baseline, if that's who they measure all men by, is those apex fallacy. Those apex examples of guys who can get any chick that they want, who can follow their own masculine imperative, which is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. Those guys, yeah, they definitely are. They can certainly do it. They're shallow as women want to make them to be. And you know what? It doesn't stop them one bit. So what happens is then they take that as their sort of example and they go, well, like this is the example that I always use is they'll say, well, when men get to be 35 or 38 or whatever, they get to be successful, then they dump every girl and they go back and they go get and bang the secretary and they find a hot 24-year-old, blonde 24-year-old with big boobs and blue eyes and I'm going to be out. Like that's like this, like that, as if that's still a thing. That's old order thinking, but it's an old order trope. It's an old order example of the apex fallacy, which is, I know of one guy who made $1 million and then he dumped his wife and he got a trophy bride. That's where the whole thing comes from, trophy bride. Because what they're doing is they're looking at the apex example. They're saying, well, if this guy will do it, then any guy will do it. No. If you want an example of why that's nonsense, look at a guy like Jeff Bezos. Who did he get with after he gave Mackenzie Bezos $33 billion with a B billions of dollars? What did he go for? Dirty Sanchez, right? He went with Lauren Sanchez. 49-year-old Lauren Sanchez with the lazy eye. Well, that sort of throws the trophy bride nonsense right out the window, right? He didn't turn into Dan Bilzerian. He turned into Mr. Beta because that's where his head's at. Most guys are beta. So that's why I always laugh at stuff like that when guys would say, oh, you guys are just shallow. Shallow is a subjective term. It's subjective to who's like, what's the standard that we're going to measure shallow against? Because I can easily make a case that women are the most shallow sex in the world if I say, well, the context is thus. So yeah, within the context of women's mating strategy, sure they are. Of course, the guys that they want to get with are extra shallow because they won't commit. Why would they? They got all kinds of access. Why wouldn't Dan Bilzerian commit? Well, maybe it's his Halloween parties. Let's see what else you got here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. Actually, I do. I do mean to be flippant. Let's see what else did you say here. Oh, Jim Jones, the Jim Jones, back from the dead, Jim Jones. What's your thoughts? Did I get this? Hold on a second. I want to see if I can put you on screen, Jim Jones. No. I cannot. I'm sorry, Jim. I have to read you. He says, what's your thoughts on autistic guys? Do you believe they are capable of gaining social skills? Yes, they are. Need to get good with women, or are they beyond help like some guys with the game world, some guys in the game world believe? I think it's by order of degrees, Jim Jones. First of all is this. I think autism and like Asperger's syndrome, I think Asperger's syndrome is to guys what BPD, borderline personality disorder, is to women. We overprescribe it in the manosphere or our men's circles and things like that. So my first order of business is saying, okay, are you clinically diagnosed with autism? Are you clinically diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome? Okay, even if you do you suffer? Are you a functional autist? Because there's a lot of functional autists. There's guys who are autistic who mask it very well. And it gets triggered by certain things, yes, but they mask it very well. And then they can still live productive lives. Like there's functional alcoholics, right? There's functional schizophrenics. There's functional BPDs, right? So what it is that you're doing. So what I'm saying is that you can always, maybe this is just my opinion, but I believe that you can always override your evolved mental firmware with software. So if you learn things, and we do this all the time, and mostly to our detriment as a society, I think, but you can override that. Can you learn? Yeah. Are you going to be as like, here's where we go with this though. Guys will be like, well, I'm an autist and I'll never learn that stuff, or I got Asperger's syndrome. Help me. I can help you insofar as you want to be helped and you believe that you can be helped. So if that's not the case, there's not really much I can do. It's like women, well, and most people, a person who doesn't want to be seduced will not be seduced. He or she has to play an active part in their own seduction. Same thing with hypnotists. You can't hypnotize somebody who doesn't want to be hypnotized. If they're resistant to it, they're never going to. So that's the first thing right there. So I think that a lot of guys need to sort of believe that they can change and they can do something. Now, the other thing is manage expectations. So if you say, well, can I get as good with women as the apex alpha? No, you won't. No, you won't. Because there might be a biological element to it. There might be something where you're never going to function. You're never going to perform as well as a guy who it just gets it and gets it a lot. You're not gonna outperform that guy. So manage expectations. I think that's where a lot of these guys from like PUA hate, and a lot of these guys who are very sort of socially retarded, and I mean that clinically, like they're retarded in their social education, is they get stunted and they stay there because they don't believe that they can move any further. And when they do believe they can move further, it's particularly with autists, it's usually all or nothing. It's black or white. You want to talk about binary extremes? Autism has that. So it's like, I'll never be like Dan Bilzerian. That's on or off. It's all or nothing. So if that is the case, if you are clinically, mentally autistic, can you ever be, as successful a guy as, these entrepreneurs or Mystery or whoever you hold up as sort of the apex example of like guys getting laid? Are you going to be that dude? No. But can you be better? Yeah. Yes. Can you learn to be more socially intelligent? Yes. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes energy. It takes, the right guidance, which most guys who like autists will go, hey, help me out, Mr. PUA guy. Help me out, Mr. Black Pill guy. Help me out, Tony Robbins. Help me out, Mr. Motivational Speaker guy. Those guys aren't like trained psychologists. They're not guys who know what you're going through, or they're not guys who went through like 8 years of school to be Dr. So-and-so. They're guys who are in the hustle economy, and they'll be happy to tell you that they can do that. But you're going to end up at a point where like those guys are not going to have the patience for you anymore because they don't know what to do with you. I won't know what to do with you. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I don't have a DR on, next. I'm not Dr. Tomassi, although I think I probably should. I'm not Dr. Tomassi. And I will tell you that. In fact, if you've ever had counseling with me, which I will still be doing soon here, if you've ever had counseling with me, the first thing I send you is an email. And in that, my policies is that if I think that I can't help you from a clinical standpoint, I will refer you to somebody that I think does, or I will tell you that. And that's the first thing I say. I make people agree to that, is like, if I think at any time that this is out of my depth, psychologically speaking, I will refer to you to somebody who can help you. Because I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to affect, like, it takes a lot of investment on the part of somebody who really wants to see you shine. And again, they're going to be fighting against your investment in yourself as well. So those are things to bear in mind. Can you change? Yes, but manage expectations, know who you're talking to, get qualified people who know what they're talking to that will invest in you. And I hate to say this, but like most guys won't. Because their time is better spent somewhere else, or their time is like, making money doing whatever it is like most grifters will do. Their time is spent better applying themselves to people who they can, like the mass majority of guys that they can help, rather than focusing on one guy who is kind of a hard luck case or is hard for them to understand because they don't have a background in psychology. So remember that, Mr. Autist, Mr. Asperger's syndrome guy who wants to get better. Yeah, good. I want you to. I hope you do. I will try to help you as best I can. I will try to point those things out, but it's only going to be as successful as you're willing to invest in yourself. And I know that sounds like a blow off, but it's not a blow off. It's true. That's if that was the case, if you're coming to me as an autist or an Asperger's guy or whatever it is, that's the first place I will start. How bad do you want it? Are you ready to get up and do it? Are you ready to, because most guys aren't. They want, oh, give me the magic pill. I don't have a magic pill. Nobody does. And if they do, they're selling you something. The Stinger says, how about, okay, I guess I'm not going to get to this today. The Stinger says, how about people, guys who had some sort of sexual encounter when they are really young, be like 10. Does that alter their sexual desire when they're older? That would be another one I'm kind of out of my depth on. I think that, that sexualizing kids, like, particularly boys, like when I see like these kids in drag, I think that we're more, especially with boys, because we're more, I think societally, this really degenerate, perverted society, right, is more comfortable sexualizing and damaging boys than they are with girls. Like we'll protect girls, like just that male protector dynamic. Oh my God, I can't believe you sexualize a little girl. What's wrong with you, you pervert? Send you to jail. But we'll put Desmond is Amazing, who is the 9 or 11-year-old drag queen, on Good Morning America. And we'll clap. Oh, so brave, so bold, so courageous. Oh, look at him. Oh, he's really breaking gender barriers at 11 years old and dressed up like a hooker in drag. Or we'll be okay with, Drag Queen Story Hour at our libraries. That's okay. But I think that we're more apt to protect little girls than we are to protect little boys, although I'm not saying we don't. But I don't think that the data is quite there just yet, because the interest isn't there. The interest in saying, well, because like we'll say, well, it doesn't matter if the kid got abused as a kid or he had that's like a statutory rape, right? At 10 years old, and whoever had sex, I don't know who had sex with a little 10-year-old, right? But that's illegal. That's statutory rape. So, what are the effects of that? Well, if it's a little boy and that little boy grows up to be like 25 years old and he's well adjusted and he's married, we don't think much about it. Or if the guy turns into like has a sex addiction or whatever you want to call it, if there is such a thing, a sex addiction, whatever, we won't chalk it up to his history so much as we chalk it up to other things that are easier to understand. For girls, we're happy to do that. For girls, if we say, well, she got abused when she was a young kid, that's why she's messed up. That's why she has daddy issues. That's why she's a stripper. That's why she has an OnlyFans. That's why blah, 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 blah. Well, we're more than willing to do that for girls, but we won't do it for boys, because we think because the onus is on boys. Boys have a burden of performance. You're supposed to get over that. You're supposed to rise above it and be better. We don't say that for girls. Oh, you poor dear. You're scarred for life. So I don't know. I just don't think that the data is quite there yet, but I'm not saying that there couldn't be. There probably is. Pisco says, just had sex. Couldn't agree more. Yep. Did you go get a big gulp? go down to 7-Eleven, get a slurp. Oh, it's summertime. Get a Slurpee. Aaron Caprio, I can put you on screen because I have caught up. Will the audiobook be out at the same time as a physical book? Probably not, but it will be out a whole lot faster. Right, Sam? As soon as I get Sam the manuscript, once I am ready to put the book on Kindle, anyways, once I'm ready to put the ebook out, Sam will have the edited perfect version of it at the same time. So that's when he'll I would say, let's just say this, book 4. God, I'm going to get Sam in trouble by saying this. Let's just say I'm going to give him 4 months. 4 months after the release of the book, the audiobook. The audiobook has always come out after stuff. I don't release at the same time. I've never done that. simply because it takes a long time to, and Sam will back me up on this. It takes a long time to master a good audiobook, and I'm going to use Sam again too. So, Pisco, that was you. Who else is in here with me? Let's see. Christian Matico, I got you already. And Pisco. Meredith, what advice do you have for a 50-year-old woman seeking a partner? Never married. Partner died in partner died in 2019. No kids, no debt, no baggage. Many men on dating sites are married and want to fling. Here's what you do, Meredith. Get into fling. Get a fling first and start from there. I don't know your background well enough to know what you look like and whatever. Here's what I would say is at 50 years old, guys are going to say, well, you hit the wall. You're hopeless. Just go. You should have grandchildren by now. Well, it doesn't mean you don't want to get back into the game. I would say this, again, manage expectations. Also, when you're out there, and I would tell this to any woman of any age, but when you are out there, try to do this. Try to separate sexual market value from personal worth. This is the biggest, I'm going to give here's some women advice. The biggest problem that women, particularly your age, but like women who are past the age of, like, say 36 up to 60 or 70, what those women tend to do is they conflate their sexual market value with their personal worth. Like, they think that because they're Mother Teresa that they should be more sexually desirable, or they should be, and you're a catch for any guy because you're a swell, sweet, nice woman. And maybe you are. And you probably have a lot of, like, intrinsic, there's probably things that are great about you. You're loving, kind. You're the epitome of, the best of humanity. But that is separate from your sexual market value. So, and unfortunately, that's the generation, that's the world we live in right now. So on Tinder, I don't care how sweet your good heart is. It's, what do you look like? Are you somebody that this guy is physically attracted to, aroused by? If not, get a personal trainer. Get it. And I know that, like, guys will say, well, they sent me that one article I mentioned before about the 60-year-old woman who got with a 23-year-old. Again, that's a rarity. You're probably not going to get with hot stud 23-year-old guy. But there are plenty of guys who are older than you who are probably looking for you. Another guy, a lot of guys are going to tell me this too. They like, I'm sure I'm going to see this, so I'm just going to address it right now. Is guys are going to go, well, you're a woman, so all you got to do is spread your legs and you'll be able to find a college guy who's looking for an easy lay. Well, at 50, you're getting close to menopause if you're not already in menopause. There's another thing to consider. So I don't think that menopause is necessarily a death sentence for women's sexuality, but it certainly puts a damper on it. So, keep that in mind, like the physical realities of what you're going through and what men are expecting from a woman of your age. So if you are 50 years old and a guy meets you and he's 56, because you're my generation, I'm 52. So if a guy's 56 years old and he's looking for, like, he's probably looking for somebody a lot younger than you. So you already have a disadvantage. Factor that in to, well, your expectations, but factor that into your dating life, into what you're going to find acceptable. But I'll tell you the same thing I will tell a 50-year-old guy is the first thing you need to do is to get yourself in first of all, the right frame of mind, understand how the sexual marketplace has changed, and get your ass in the gym and improve your look, improve your physicality. Most women do that anyway. And maybe, you said your partner died, and I'm sorry about that, but most women will do that sort of in preparation as it is anyways. And I think you're going to be surprised if you look in the right places. If you're don't just use, like, Tinder, right? Or Match.com. Like, you get out there and actually socialize, be open, be available. I don't know, be feminine, right? That right there would be enough for a lot of guys. Oh, I found a feminine woman. Holy crap. Let's see. Assange read the article Up the Alpha. A shift from beta to alpha is like a resurrection. More women are On the alpha seed, is that transformation necessary? It is if you are all, remember when I wrote that article, it was written to guys who are already predominantly beta. So it's an uphill battle. As I said in Iron Rule of Tomassi number 7, it is, well, this part of it is time better spent for you to develop new relationships rather than try to rekindle an old one. And that includes the one that you are already in right now that maybe she's checked out of, or maybe you've checked out of. Or maybe you got to the point where you're like, okay, I've read about all this stuff that Rollo's talking about, and, I'm going to break up with her because she's never going to see me as anything other than a beta. Start over with somebody new. Sometimes that might, if that option is available to you, that's what I would suggest. So there's always an uphill. You're going to spend more time and effort trying to go from beta to alpha, right? And like a lot of guys get like, this is age old criticism of the red pill. Like guys will say, well, Rollo, you're turning these guys into a bunch of a-holes. These guys are going to turn into jerks because of you. Well, I wouldn't worry about that, because there are more beta guys who would be better off leaning into the jerk side of the spectrum rather than the nice guy of the spectrum, because their entire lives they've been Mr. Nice Guy the whole time, and their entire lives they've been accommodating and agreeable and everything. And then when I say talk about mental point of origin or enlightened self-interest, that sounds like I'm speaking Chinese. So don't worry about the guys turning into jerks and a-holes. All right. Most guys don't have a problem with that. They're not going to turn into bigger, jerks. Most guys have a problem with being too nice, not being too jerky. So let's see, Andy, where are you, Andy? Can I get to you? Andy, where did you go, Andy? Oh, I got you. There you are. Andy says, what sort of PUA community did you observe, if any, back in the 80s, 90s rockstar Hollywood? There wasn't really any. I mean, there was guys who knew what they were doing. I mean, I don't know. It's instinctual, man. It's really instinctual. There wasn't, I didn't, like when I was in my early to mid 20s, it's not like there was a group of guys and we're all sitting around the table taking notes. Okay, well, then what does she say? And then how do I do this? That didn't exist. There was no like pickup artist kind of community. That's why I thought it was interesting when it actually happened, when we had the ability to do something like that online in forums and such. Yeah. Now there wasn't anything like that, but I think it's more instinctual. And of course we didn't have the advantage of like having a cell phone or the internet or an iMac, whatever, we didn't have anything like that. So it was very much trial and error, and it was usually it wasn't like when I learned to sort of like reliably get laid. It wasn't because I said I'm going to learn how to reliably get laid. I didn't think that. I just knew what I wanted, and I was observant, and I used that observation, and I was trial and error, and what I was doing worked for me. I'm not saying it would work for you or anybody else even at that time, but it worked for me. And I don't think that a lot of guys have that experience anymore. That's why they keep talking about buffers and everything else. You spend too much time behind a screen reading, characters on a screen rather than going out and actually getting, a drink thrown in your face or whatever. How do you learn from bad experiences if you're not having those experiences? What else? Eugene. What kind of relationship will work for an alpha female? There's no such thing as an alpha female. Does she need a beta? No. Here's the deal. I'll give you the brief rundown. And I have done. Go to my website, type in alpha female, and you'll get this. It's actually a fairly. I think I did it like last year, or the year before. There's no such thing as an alpha female. And when someone says, I'm an alpha female, I'm a strong, independent woman, but I know how to be feminine now and then, and I know how to treat a man right. And like right now, I think that a lot of women who believed at one time that they were alpha females, now they get to a point in their lives where they go, wow, I better taper this off or I'm not going to find a man. I better taper this off if I want to have a family. I better say that, well, I'm a strong, independent woman, so I still have that as sort of like my own ego appeasement. But I can bring home the bacon and then wear a nice, dress, or I can whatever. Like they think they can be the best of both worlds. The fact of the matter is that the idea of the alpha female, and this is just the briefest version I can give you of this, is that women who say that they are alpha females are basically using the same template as an alpha male, but with a person who has a vagina. So when a woman says, I'm an alpha male, I'm an alpha female, I make decisions, I kick ass and take names, she's describing an alpha male. An alpha female would actually be a very hot, like 10 on the 10 scale swimsuit model who is very sexual, very available, very, very loyal. Right? If you think about all the things that a man would say would make a woman like the ideal woman, that is an alpha female. So that's an alpha female from a feminine, in a feminine context. When women refer to themselves as alpha females now, it's in a masculine context because they have never, for 4 generations, they don't know anything different. It's the warrior princess nonsense. I can go and I'm as tough as any guy. Well, yeah, because you're a guy, because that's the environment and that's the context in which you live. And that is the metric by which you measure yourself and your self-worth, by a masculine ideal, not a feminine ideal. So a true alpha female would look like, a perfect, it would look like one of those chicks that Dan Blitzerian has hanging around his house in swimsuits, his custom swimsuits, right? It would be the girl who, like, most men would say, I want to get with that girl. I want her like today. That's again, sexual agency. That's because men and women are different. We have different criteria for what makes that other person attractive and what makes a guy, the things that make a guy alpha are not going to translate into attraction for women, like in women anyways. So when a guy he's dominant, he's at the top of the dominance hierarchy, he's competent, he's in shape, he is self-centered, he's self-focused, he has drive, he has ambition. You name the best qualities that you can think of an alpha male, put those into the female, and they don't translate to 1 ounce of sex appeal for most guys. They're not looking to bang another guy. Well, most heterosexual guys are not looking to bang another guy. They want to bang a woman. They want to get with a woman. They want to get with a woman who is the ideal of femininity, and this is from a heteronormative perspective, right? Now, those guys are going to go, no, I want a strong, independent woman. Yeah. The reason you do is because you think that's the easiest way to solve your reproductive problem, which is what we're talking about today. Let's see. So there is no such thing as an alpha female. So I'd throw that one back in your alpha female girlfriend's face. To quickly go, again, my friend Eugene, to quickly go from beta to alpha, is it a good idea? From beta to alpha, is it a good idea to simply remove any and all possibility of emotional attachment into a female? If you don't care about her, isn't that closer to being an alpha? Well, think about it this way. Why is it that first of all, why do you think that an alpha male doesn't care about women, doesn't want to get emotionally invested? Is it because he's an asshole? Is it because he is too self-centered? He's selfish. He's a jerk. He's dark triad, right? Is that because is that what qualifies that guy? And is that why he's like, I'm emotionally unavailable. I don't want to catch feelings for a girl. Is that why? Or is it simply a matter of opportunity? Is he a selfish jerk because he has sex with a woman and then he leaves her and he gets on with the next one because he has the opportunity to do so because he's 20%er? Is it because he's a jerk? Is it because he's a dark triad? Because he's a manipulative son of a bitch? Is that it? No. It's usually, I'm not saying that they're not the guys. There aren't guys like that. I'm sure there are. They're arrogant, self-centered guys, right? But the reason why we think in terms of like not having emotional connections with women is because most guys who have that kind of availability, who have that opportunity, they don't form those connections because they don't have to. They have the opportunity. They have abundance, and they know they have abundance because probably for most of their lives, They've been rewarded with women's sexuality. They've been rewarded with women's interest. They've been rewarded with pats on the back. They've been rewarded with, man, you're really good looking. Like that's what they've been rewarded. So they have no real interest, or they have no education that has pointed them into investing emotionally in a woman, unless they have some sort of, like most of them do, have some sort of like blue pill conditioning or religion, or their mom said, don't hurt, don't break women, don't break a girl's heart, right? Like that kind of stuff. And most of them do. Very rare are you going to find a guy who's not going to be in some way emotionally attached to a woman that he has sex with. But the ones that aren't, and the ones that aren't are the ones you think of as sort of like, oh, that's what an alpha male looks like. He is emotionally unavailable because he can be emotionally unavailable. He's emotional. He's not invested in emotional attachments with a female because it's usually been women for the natural, right? For the guy who we would say is stereotypically alpha. It's usually been women who form the emotional attachment with him. So it's like it flips the script. And that's really hard for most beta guys to wrap their heads around. So to actually have the genuine desire, the genuine interest, the genuine like, oh, I really want to, I can't think of it. I can't stop thinking about you, right? That ride or die girl. That most guys don't get that. Most guys will always, most beta men, the 80% men, the 80%ers, they're going to live probably and die according to a transactional understanding of sex. If I perform, if I make this money, if I do these things, then I get sex. That's pretty much the beta male understanding. And I'm going to throw this out there really quickly because this is sort of pertinent to your question as well. I meant to do this. This was Dr. David Lay's thing. I told you this before. He had shown this thing on sexual partners and like the decline, I guess. 1 in 3 men aged, so 1/3, men aged 18 to 24 report no sex, like zero, like zip. And that was from that study. So, but here's what I thought was interesting is the first thing that came out, I'll close those out. Let's see, where is this? It was 2000 to 2018. Sexual inactivity increased among men 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 and women aged 25 to 34. So women between the age of 18 and 25, we're still getting after it. And women who are in the 25 to 34 cohort are still nowhere close to the same range as men in that cohort. So what's the first thing out of anybody's mouth? What do you think is the reasoning for that? Well, it's because men have dropped out. Men don't have jobs. Men are economically unattractive. Men don't do this. Men aren't performing. Men aren't living up to their masculine duties that they used to. Men did this and men did, and it's this litany. Oh, it's porn. It's because they're jerking off the porn all the time. They're playing video games. It's because, and then I said this before in an article I wrote called The Something Else. And if it wasn't those things, it would be something else. It's just because it's porn, just because, that's the easy answer, right? But it's always viewed from an old order understanding that women are only interested. According to these brilliant researchers who are probably mostly female, because in psychology, women make up the lion's share of psychologists now. I think it's like 78 or 80% of college graduates who graduate with a degree in psychology are all women. So probably this is you want to know why they come to these conclusions. It's because what they say anyways is if you ask your average clinical psychologist, the reason for this is because men aren't living up. It's not had anything to do with the sexual marketplace. It has nothing to do with new order understanding of that sexual marketplace. Nothing to do with hypergamy. Nothing to do with alpha seed and beta need. I shouldn't say that. It is only beta need. So if you ask them, the only reason a woman will ever have sex is because she won't have sex with you. Why? Well, you didn't marry her. You didn't have a job. You didn't have financial prospects. You didn't come from a good family. You didn't love puppies, right? It's all based on the attraction side of hypergamy. It's all, instead of the arousal side, it's all based, like the reason why they say 18 to 24-year-old guys aren't getting sex, aren't getting laid, the reason why they say that is because those guys are not preparing themselves to be the beta in waiting, to be the guy who's like, okay, is it my turn now? I've got a great job. I'm going to make partner in the law firm. According to popular clinical psychology, the only reason women have sex is because the guy's rich, because the guy's got a nice car, because the guy's he's going to buy his first house, because he's doing his residency and for his doctorate. That's the only reason women would ever spread their legs is because the guy's got a lot of money. Who thinks that? Women will say that because women do not want to accept or do not want to popularize the idea that it doesn't matter how much money you got. When I was poor, dirt poor, I had 2 nickels to rub together, man. I got more tail than most guys. Certainly the 18 to 24 years olds do today. Lots. Since I was 17, getting laid regularly since I was regularly since for a long time. Let's just say since I was 17 years old. You think I had a lot of money? You think I had a lot of financial prospects when I was 22? No. I had one bedroom studio apartment in North Hollywood. I had a spool. I had a spool for my dining room table. You know those big spools that they like the road construction would like wrap a big old cable like the telephone cables around. That was my dining room table, right? And a little mini fridge. Women didn't care. They didn't care what you had. They no, you didn't get those drapes at Bed Bath and Beyond. I'm not gonna have sex with you. It has nothing to do with that. Well, having sex, anyways. Maybe marriage, maybe like starting a family. And that's really where I wanted to end with this today, is that the reproductive problem usually ends in family creation. It usually ends, or at least I was asked earlier, shouldn't that be the goal? Shouldn't those landmarks, those milestones in a man's life be the goal? Well, if you are going to solve your reproductive problem, you can do it in one of 2 ways. You can do so, and a lot of guys are doing it these days, is you have sex with a woman and be gone, right? Women will choose that. Women we live in the only era, since the sexual evolution, we've lived in the only era in which a woman can choose and socially accepted choose to be a single mother. She can go down, she can freeze her eggs, she can do it at pretty much any time. I mean, as long as she can, carry a viable pregnancy to term, you can do it pretty much right up until she's about 40. Although women will still try to do that. Now, it's not inadvisable, but technically it's possible. You can go down to the sperm bank. Freeze my eggs. Let's get those 2 critters together, put it in me, and then I'll have a baby. And I'll choose who. Oh, he looks hot, man. He looks great. Let's get that guy. He looks like he plays water polo. And they can do that. Men can't do that. We don't have that kind of opportunity. We do, but only the very rich men and the most patient men have access to something like that. But, in the end, what's the final outcome of that? What's the final purpose? To send the next generation into the next generation, right? To send the next generation into perpetuity. So when we're talking about reproduction, human reproduction, there's 2 ways to do it. Like I said, like guys can follow their biological instinct. The 20%ers can bang a lot of women and then let the beta men take care of those kids, 1 by 1 or 1 by 3, and can do that. So that's step 1. That's possibility number 1. The other possibility is you have sex, you meet a girl, you have sex, you like her, you get together with her, you start a family with her, and you've created another family. And that's really the end result. And that's why I wanted to end today, is that the end of the reproductive problem. You want to know why men need sex? Because we need families, and we need good families. And that's a part of life. Like I was saying I have the essay that's in the description here. It's called, Men Need Sex. And at the end of that, I said this. I said that when a guy comes up to me and he says, I'm 30 years old and I've never had sex, I'm a virgin, or he's proud, or even to an extent, I would say Roosh too, they're proud to be celibate. And they think that, I'm above sex. I'm more intelligent. I'm more evolved. I've taken that little pill and I've turned off my libido. And I'm a better person for it. And I'm more enlightened. I'm closer to God, or whatever, the universe, or whatever you want to call it. I'm better because I'm not having sex. Are you? because you're not sending anybody into the next. Roosh certainly is not sending anybody into the next, unless he gets busy real soon. He finds his perfect virgin bride. So beware of your convictions limiting you from creating a family, from having sex, from living a healthier life. When I hear somebody who says, I've never had sex, or I'm proud to have never had sex, I don't see that as sort of like, oh, well, you seem like you're very evolved. You're a new form of human. I don't think that. You know what I think? I think that I look at people I look at guys like this, and I guess women too, but mostly guys, because they're the ones that are really proud of this. I look at that and I go, to me, the impression that I get, and this is going to piss people off, and I do not care. When I see a guy like that, and he tells me like, I've never had sex, or I'm not into having sex, or I've stopped having sex. To me, it's like seeing a guy who got like a limb cut off, or he has some sort of disability and you have to wheel him around in a wheelchair. It's that same kind of feeling. Like there's some part of that guy who, in his process of his life here on planet Earth, from 0 to 50 or 40, whatever he is, he has in some way not ever experienced what I would say 99% of most men on planet Earth have experienced. So I can say, well, biologically you need sex because you have to reproduce. That's part of your, part of who you are and what you're about here in the United States, on planet Earth, right? That's what we do. That's what men do. You're the product of successful reproduction. No way around that. And you're going to tell me you're proud that you're not going to send someone from your own bloodline into the next generation? I look at that as a disability. I look at that as like you lost an arm. And I said this in that article, like when we see somebody who runs like a marathon and they run it really good, or maybe they win a marathon, and we go, wow, that's incredible. You're one of the elite men, women, whatever, that can run a marathon and win a marathon. That's awesome. Now, if that guy wins the marathon and that guy he's a paraplegic, or he has some sort of disability, or he's got something's wrong with him and he still wins a marathon, or he even completes a marathon, we go, that's a triumph of human will. You're amazing. You've lifted yourself above everything and beat all the odds. And that's the thing, is like, I think guys who are like very proud of their celibacy tend to think in those terms. Well, I'm a successful guy and I've never had sex. Well, to me anyways, that seems like human males on planet Earth should have sex. And one other, like a lot of guys will say, well, it's a religious thing, right? Well, it's celibacy is something I've committed myself to. I'm a pastor or whatever. You can do it. There's monks, right? Monk mode, right? That's what we call it. That. What about those guys? What about they're a higher plane. Well, don't forget that all of the first thing we associate with like the Catholic Church and Catholic priests, what is the first thing we associate with male priests, right? Sex abuse, homosexuality. That's the first thing now, not all of them are like that. I get that. I'm not saying that's, yes, it's been rampant for a long time. Maybe not as much as everyone wants to hype it up, but it's still what we associate. And why? Why is it that we think of like celibacy as unnatural or something that's difficult? Because it's something that is a drive in human males. It's something, and I would say more so than in males than in human females. And necessarily so, because women have to be the filter. Men are just ready to go, right? It's our biology. It's what we have to do. So anytime somebody says, well, celibacy is great because you're closer to God. Well, then why is it that why is it that my association with Catholic priests, celibate Catholic priests, is one of child abuse or, pedophilia? Why is there that association? Because those guys are doing something that most men in planet Earth don't do. Pretend that they can live above that. Like even Roosh was saying that. I just pray to Jesus and he takes away that desire. Okay, Roosh. Yeah. Well, I hope that he can solve that. I hope that he finds the right girl. I hope that, I wish the best for him. Like I wouldn't wish that on anybody, because, oh, you don't like Roosh. I don't care. I hope he does well, but from that kind of rationalization, I don't know if I see that. And at some point, he's going to have to want to have sex again. He's going to have Jesus, please give me my libido back because I found the right girl and now I want to have sex and now I want to procreate. Oh, okay. I guess we'll turn the spigot back on. It's not, I'm not going to say it's a disability, but I think that it is something that men need. And that if we don't find some sort of, like, you want to know why pornography is so ubiquitous, that's why. Because that's our natural drive. And so how you manage that, how you deal with that is kind of what I wanted to get into today. And I think I've gotten into that pretty well. So anyways, I am going to end here because we are now at 2 hours and almost 35 minutes. So thank you again for watching. If you have any questions, I'm always available in the comments here. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'll be happy to talk to you, especially about this particular topic, because it's one that I've discussed on several occasions. Yes, I understand Rush's sister died, and my brother-in-law died, and my other brother-in-law died, and a lot of people I know have died, and that are very close, that have been very close to me. And I understand that, and I completely appreciate and can empathize with exactly that. So, it's not that I'm not, what time is it? I'm not shitting on Rush. Okay. I get it, but understand the process, understand what's happening here, understand why he's where he's at right now. And again, I'm not coming down on the guy. I want to look at the process, not the person, this is not ad hom. This is not a tear down. Just look at what's going on and how he came to be what he is. I don't say he serves as a warning. All right, guys, that's it. I promise I will be on Rule Zero on Saturday. I couldn't be on this Saturday because I had some prior commitments, both work commitments, and I actually was recording with the band that I play with too. So I had two things to do that day. And, but I will be back on Saturday. I am working out a interview with Deepika Bardujwan. I hope that's the right name. She is I guess for lack of a better term, you would call her an MRA, but she's not really an MRA. She is a men's rights, but a men's interests, men's issues documentarist. She's a video producer. She's produced at least 2 films right now on the state of marriage in India right now. And it's, you want to know what's going to happen here in the United States. It's going to probably come back this way very soon. I can definitely see something like this in India. Of course, it's a different economic situation, but I'm going to talk to her about what marriage and the intersexual dynamics and sexual marketplace is like in India as soon as I can line up a time. She is in Delhi and I am in Reno, Nevada. So 1 o'clock here is 3 a.m. for her. So I'm going to have to do it on a different day than this show. And so it will most likely be in the morning my time. I will let you guys know. I'll definitely put an announcement. Check my Patreon. If you're not a member, please become a member. If you would like to contribute to the financial interests of this show, please do. All of the links are in the description. And 4th book is coming along swimmingly. So I will see you guys Saturday on Rule Zero. It will be, I believe, it will be on Ryan Stone's channel. It's his turn. And then again, Sunday, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on this channel. I think I might get into the wall on Sunday. So there you go. See you guys then. Bye-bye.